Welcome to Talking Tea with Auntie, where we interview everyday people about their everyday lives and interesting topics. Today we have a long episode with a polyamory coach by the name of Magenta. Now on to me, Shining Nathan. Hello lovers, welcome to Talking Tea with Auntie, and this is your gay auntie. I'm so excited to have you all here. As always, this is a wonderful instance. We're going to be interviewing an everyday person on a fantastic topic. And today we have a fantastic guest who is Magenta, who is a polyamory coach here in the United States, I believe in California. And it's a very fantastic topic I am very excited to get into. Now, if you love my content and it came here organically via any of the algorithms, feel free to subscribe to this channel. And if you want to support your gay auntie on creating more of this content or ask our guests questions from our Patreon section, feel free to become a patron on my Patreon at patreon.com/Shining Nathan. Now let's bring our fantastic guest, Magenta, shall we? Hello, Magenta. How are you, my love?
Fantastic. How are you?
I am doing beautifully. Welcome to Talking Tea with Auntie. How is your evening?
It's really good. I'm really glad to be here. I can finally calm down, just be present.
Oh, I love that. So I'm gonna be looking down here because my screen's down there. I'm house sitting for a friend today, so I had to come up with the setup.
I understand. I'm currently sitting on my bed, so
Beautiful. Best way to be, honestly.
I think the blur is really high. Let me see if I can take that down a little. Weird things are happening with the background.
Nothing wrong. Feel free to give it an adjustment.
I do all my work on Google Meets.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like the one person who doesn't actually know how to use Zoom.
It's okay. I know Zoom and I suck at Google Meets, so we're exchanged.
Okay, I feel like this is a little better.
That's a lot, but I love your tapestry. It's absolutely stunning.
Thank you. I like your hat. That is awesome. That is cute.
Thank you. It's summer here in Texas, so I need something that's not felt on my head in order to stay cool.
That is really smart. Yeah, it should be summer here too, but it has been is floods and rain. I'm a cold weather person, so I've been really liking it. But today, I'm not even wearing a sweater.
Oh, honestly, I love it. You're in South California, correct?
Northern California.
Northern California. I love Northern California. I went to San Francisco last summer and it was absolutely beautiful.
I'm in Alameda, which is right 30 minutes on a good day.
Yeah.
3 hours on a bad day.
Oh, honestly, that sounds like Houston, so I fully get it. I live in San Antonio, but I'm here in Houston for a few more days. But yeah, that's basically the same. So Magenta, tell me about you. Let's get right into it. Tell me about yourself. What brought you on this beautiful journey to become a polyamory coach?
Oh my gosh. Well, I discovered polyamory when I was in my late teens. I stumbled across a couple of books. I think a lot of people my age discovered polyamory through the same books, Ethical Slut.
Mm-hmm. I've read that one.
Massively impactful. Stranger in a Strange Land, which doesn't hold up to a current reading all that well. It's a problematic book but for when it was written and for when I found it, it was really philosophically impactful. Mm-hmm. So I discovered, we didn't have the term, at least I had not heard the term polyamorous, but I discovered ethical non-monogamy at that point. It really resonated with me. I started doing a lot of public speaking. I'm a talker, you'll see.
I love it.
But I started doing a lot of public speaking, kind of outreach education around queer issues and kink and polyamory, and I'm really in love with human beings. I love interpersonal interactions. I love how we love. I love how we deal with our traumas and our pain and our passions. And so it's kind of always been my main focus in life. So I kind of been sort of unofficially coaching for a long time, along with, teaching. And then something like 6 or 7 years ago, I had finished doing a live talk about polyamory. And I realized my favorite part of it was when audience members would come up and we'd start talking and they'd ask me their individual, they'd say, okay, I'm having struggles with this or I'm having struggles with that. And here's where I'm going to sound maybe a little bit hubristic. I kept having useful tools for them, and I kept getting to be useful. And I realized there was nothing in the world that makes me happier than getting to sit with people and work through challenging experiences. And I'm sorry, am I talking too much? This is getting
No, I'm loving it. Keep going. This is about you, my love. Keep going.
So yeah, I was also seeing that polyamory has become a lot more common. It's gained a lot of traction socially, and people are discovering it and they're loving it and they're drawn to it because it's a wonderful way of being and of relating to the world. But they don't always have the tools that they need. People, they jump in and they do sometimes extraordinary amounts of damage to themselves and the people they care about, not out of ill intent, not because they're careless, but because it's a hard process and they don't have the tools. So I had a couple friends suggest that I start doing this professionally, and I thought that is insane. I didn't actually know there were other people doing this. There are a lot of other coaches out there. Not a lot, but there are
comparatively.
Yeah, I didn't know that it was a thing. So from my perspective, I was inventing a whole new thing. And I just decided, again, it is really hubristic to say, I have such good opinions or useful opinions about relationships. You should pay me for that information. Sounds kind of crazy. But I'm useful, and I keep getting to be useful for people. And so now I've been doing this professionally for about 6 years. Beautiful. And it's such an honor. It's the most lovely thing. I love my job so much. I can't even put words to it.
And polyamory, because I'm a person that loves love, and I have my base is monogamy, which is valid for me. But over the years, I have dated people that are non-monogamous, and that allowed me to kind of stretch my wings and understand I am capable, with the proper communication and love, to be in these non-monogamous spaces, even though monogamy is my base setting. And I love love, and love is one of the most beautiful things that we as a species get to experience. And so when I am able to hear people being able to live non-monogamously or being polyamorous in such a beautiful way, I think it's just fantastic. As much as it is when there's a couple that's been together beautifully and happily monogamously forever, I think they're both equally just stunning. And so let's just circle back, and along that journey, when you found the books, what was yearning you to that path to polyamory back then? Was there like something like this click in your mind that was like, you know what?
Well, it was actually, I've been thinking a lot about that journey actually, because one, I didn't philosophically, I didn't feel particularly jealous or distrustful or, let me step back.
It's okay.
I was raised very much with a very strong monogamy background. I believed very strongly about it. My first partner, my first boyfriend, it was not a good relationship. It matched a lot of the sort of toxic, problematic structures that I'd been raised with. And part of that was sort of this sense, this is not good monogamy. This is not indicative of monogamy. This is indicative of bad monogamy. But it was very based around ownership and possessiveness. And I felt myself, I was pretty young in that relationship, but I felt myself having to become smaller. I found myself having to pretend to jealousy and insecurity in order to make my partner feel better about himself. It was a wonky situation. I was young. I tolerated way too much.
I think that's a lot for all of us at that age.
Right. And I believed at that time that in order to be in love, in order to have love, you had to be willing to suffer. You had to be willing to fight for it. And love is hard and love is painful. And, if you deserved love, then you needed to man up. You gotta, that's awful. It's an awful model. When I broke out of that relationship, and he was my first everything. I was absolutely certain that we were going to get married, which is the only reason I did anything with him. And this was the love of my life. And in my teenage mind, I believed this was my one chance of true love. And I realized at some point that I'd rather be single than become smaller for somebody else. But in my melodramatic teenage way, I thought, I'm going to leave this person and I will never have love again. I never wanted to be in that relationship again. I never wanted to feel trapped or small. And then I found these books. Also, I found this book on like an experimental, what do you call it? Experimental marriage in the 70s, like group marriage thing. And that was really interesting. It taught me a bunch of stuff. But I realized, especially through reading Ethical Slut, that there were other ways to live, that there was the possibility of living wholly and completely and full-heartedly and still traveling and having adventures and all of these wonderful things, that I could have my independence and still possibly have love. It made so much sense to me. But I have to say that my first round of polyamory was trauma-informed. It was somewhat fear-based. And then I met, in my 20s, I met the person I later ended up marrying, and we ended up being functionally monogamous for a good chunk of time. Poly was always on the table.
Yeah.
But we were functionally monogamous, and I honestly needed that, because I got to learn how to be in a loving, stable, healthy relationship where I wasn't diminished. I didn't have to be smaller. I wasn't coming to polyamory from a place of fear and lack. So when I decided to transition to polyamory, I got to re-enter that space from a place of being replete and happy and whole. And I'm really glad that I had my monogamous period. But it was exactly right for me at that time in my life. And even then my poly was still allowed for like snuggle parties and making out with friends. That was a non-optional kind of thing. But when I transitioned back into polyamory, it felt like settling back into the wholest and most complete expression of myself as an autonomous and whole human being. So that's kind of how I got here.
It's beautiful.
You asked like a 3-word question.
Oh no, I don't want 3 minute. I don't want 3-word answers, darling. You can ramble as much as you want. It gives beautiful insight into your you-ness, which I think is delightful.
You are lovely.
Thank you so much. I'm trying to I'm looking at you here, but I know I'm not looking at you there.
Okay, I feel it.
Yeah, I'm not. But so one of the things, I guess, as a polyamory coach, what is one of the things that you see? Because I know I personally see as both the major cities, the West Coast, everything in California, and New York specifically on the East Coast, as these beautiful places where society has grown, and then everything else in the middle is kind of like still. I mean, I'm in Texas, so I see people attempt polyamory as a way to fix their not polyamory, non-monogamy, as a way to fix their monogamous relationship. And what is the pitfalls you see with people either finally embracing their true polyamory or actually acknowledging that maybe that's the same question worded differently, acknowledging the fact that they maybe belong in a more polyamorous type of love environment?
I'm really sorry. I'm not exactly sure. Can you say
Let
that?
me reword it, because I was like, my brain kind of went a little.
I know, like different directions I could go.
Oh, go. I mean, if you can go in other directions. No. So I think the question is, what is preventing more people from being able to explore this form of love, both non-monogamy and polyamory, because there can be a difference between the two, considering amory is the love aspect and non-monogamy is the sexual aspect. What do you think is keeping people, especially those of us in these other states, from actually acknowledging that may be a part of themselves?
one thing that's really interesting with my work is that you would be shocked how many of my clients are from the middle states, from the South. I've worked with a lot of people in Texas and Georgia and Louisiana, and non-monogamy. Hi, my cat's here, wants to say hello.
Oh, beautiful.
Hi, baby. We'll see. I may have to evict him.
Okay.
There are a lot of people that are trying to explore this, but it's very, very challenging, partially because of our societal expectations. On the coasts, I think partly because there's a larger queer culture. And queer culture tends to come with iconoclasm. It comes with people reevaluating and rewriting their ideas of what is love and what is acceptable and what's real and valid. So it's easier in those areas. There's, people gather in those areas, but the desire to love openly, the desire, and it really is, there's definitely the sex aspect, but a lot of people, it really is about the ability to connect emotionally with the wonderful people that we are lucky enough to meet. But the more, I think, insulated you are, the harder it gets, because there's so few examples. It's very much like being poly is a lot like being queer. Actually, Dan Savage said this at one point, and I thought this is really true, that being poly is like being queer 20 years ago. People are trying to get, and there's still places where it is really, really dangerous to be queer, and I'm not diminishing that.
No, 100%.
But people kind of get it. There's a lot more openness, there's a lot more acceptance. But poly still feels absolutely crazy pants for a lot of society. It's people are willing to accept queerness, provided it kind of falls in that heteronormative format. And you get polyamory, which is saying, not only are we potentially queer, but we're also going to throw all of these precepts just out of the window. And the fear of being slut-shamed or diminished or disrespected or thrown out of one's family, being shunned, is so intense. And then often when people try it, it's hard also because, if you're living in a small town, kind of hard to find other people that happen to be wired the same way that you are.
Yeah.
It's just more challenging. But I actually think there's a lot more of it out there happening, and I think there always has been, than one would actually necessarily think, including and I have to say, including amongst the right-wing conservative crowd. I had an experience with a family that I knew very well, where they were hardcore. They were part of like the Quiverful Make a Lot of Christian Babies movement.
Yeah.
Very, very conservative. I mean, they ripped the photo or the drawing of the Venus de Milo out of their child's encyclopedia because naked. Very, very conservative. At one point, a friend of mine was on the phone with them, gets off the phone in complete shock. And I find out that they had called from the local dungeon. They were poly, they were kinky, they were still incredibly judgy about other people. But they had been actively living a lifestyle, but they had it they had framed it under a particular version of Christian ethos. That sort of justified or excused or made space
for these actions.
And so I think you'd be surprised at how much funny business is going on in the background everywhere. And I think, sorry, I feel like I'm kind of rambling right now, but
no, you're fine. Go ahead.
The difference now is that we want to be out in the open. We don't want to be secretive. We don't want to be hiding, and we don't want to be filled with shame. And that goes against a lot of the rules, which is why it's hard.
And I fully see that. So in this exploration of polyamory, have people realized a healthier version of themselves that they may apply to monogamy? Have you, because I've seen people that explored polyamory and they've made mistakes, of course, because they don't have the word or the communication or the knowledge. But during that process, they become better at monogamy than they were previously, or just in general, loving themselves, because polyamory is Have you seen any of that?
Oh my gosh, 100%. I think that there are a few things in polyamory that are specialized to polyamory, but in general, love is love. And the skills that we are required to learn to be functional or capable in polyamory are exactly what we need to be functional and capable in monogamy. One of the things that I think monogamy allows us to do is it can, not all monogamous relationships by any means, but it can make it easy for us to ignore our baggage. And if we find somebody where our trauma and their trauma fit together in a way that nobody triggers anybody else and everything's fine, and as long as everybody kind of follows the rules, things go smoothly. And of course, even in monogamous relationships, that can backfire. But in poly, you don't get any of that.
No.
Polyamory is not for the faint of heart. It makes you face all of your stuff, all of your abandonment issues, all of your trauma, all of the ways you deal with conflict, the way you communicate. It makes us deal with everything. And the results of that, sometimes I have a lot of clients who come to me and they're like, I don't know if I want to be poly. And I always tell them, I will never try to proselytize poly to somebody who doesn't want to be poly. I feel great about polyamory. It's very important to me. One of my early clients, I felt so good about this. After a lot of work, we together got on their dating profile and changed themselves from polyamory to monogamy because they realized, I don't want to be poly. I was like, yes, I'm so happy. They had figured out what they actually wanted, what was right for them. But the work they had done in that process helped them to figure out how they wanted to relate, how they wanted to be in their relationships. It was really inspiring. And so I always tell people, look, the work that you're doing, and it takes work for a lot of people, transitioning from monogamy to polyamory, it takes a lot of work. It is not easy. And I've had people say like, well, what if I decide I don't want this? I'm trying it. My partner's asked me to try it. I'm giving it the college try, but I don't know if I want to land here. Is this even worth it? And I always feel like all of the work that you're doing in this process will make you a better person. It will make you more able to know your own boundaries and to respect them and to hear other people. It will make you better at resolving conflict. It'll make you better at holding your ground in a respectful and loving way. It's and in the same, I take aspects of the way I learned to relate with my husband in that monogamous dynamic. That comes into poly. It's all the same. It's all just like the details, the frosting, the wrapping paper is different, but fundamentally, being a loving, present, conscious, thoughtful partner, same.
And what is the biggest hurdle one of the biggest hurdles whenever they're starting to consider, or one of the biggest, oh gosh, what's the word I want to use? I had the word and I lost it. What is one of the biggest mistakes people make when they start entering or delving into polyamory in general? Or even if I heard the term unicorn, I don't know if that's still used, or if they enter that type of dynamic, what is the pitfall or mistakes they make, the biggest ones?
Well, it's funny. Those are so the unicorn thing is its whole own conversation, because
really?
Oh yeah, no, going into the unicorn dynamic, that just right there, fundamentally you're in trouble. You're like quicksand right there.
Okay.
Happy to go into, but
let's put a pin in that one so we can discuss more.
So there are a couple of main categories of people that I tend to talk to. And one of them are people who are in previously ostensibly monogamous relationships transitioning to poly. One of the things that So I write notes. I have like a little notepad that I write stuff. And occasionally I'm talking to a client and, they'll say this one thing and then I just end up writing like really big letters, fuck. And it's like, that's become code for, oh no, that again. Oh no. Which is when people are maybe philosophically poly inclined, they have that inclination. They haven't had words for it. Usually it's people that haven't had words for it. They maybe don't have a framework. They don't understand exactly why maybe monogamy feels so hard for them, but they're in a monogamous relationship and then they need somebody great. And then they develop a deep relationship to this person. And then they discover polyamory, which makes it kind of okay that they're having feelings for a person outside of their monogamous relationship. And then they go to their monogamous partner and say, hey, so how do you feel about monogamy? I mean, how do you feel about polyamory? Also, there's this person I really want you to meet. And it's so, and it's not that people end up in that position. It happens more than I would like to happen. It's not because people are being, in general, it's not because people are being malicious. It's not intentional. They just suddenly wake up and they're in the deep end of the pool. They didn't see it happening and suddenly they are, uh-oh. And it just makes that transition 1,000 times harder because there's already a philosophical breach of trust. It's really hard to rebuild trust while also trying to open a relationship. It's not that it isn't possible, but it does make the situation so much harder. And also people will bring to their partners like, hey, I'm discovering polyamory. I'd like to give this a try. And they get impatient, so their poor partners, their poor monogamous partners think everything's fine. Everything's beautiful. And then all of a sudden it's like, you're in the deep end of a pool you didn't even want to get into. And there's this sense of being dragged behind like a wild horse, it's just, how do I even begin to catch up with that? There's a need to go slowly, to not feel time constrained in this process. And that's something I think actually monogamy teaches us a sense of resource and time scarcity. In monogamy, there's kind of a general idea. If you meet somebody wonderful, you got to lock it down immediately or it will go away. They find somebody else, they will disappear. You got to you find it and you catch it. With poly, it's a lot more, I think, there's a lot more space. It doesn't have to be now. We make choices. We have to be very intellectually engaged in the choices that we make so that we are strategic and thoughtful in our process. It's not just, I met somebody and they're hot and I like them. So, it's all right. I now have, if you're fully poly, I have multiple relationships. I met somebody really hot and lovely. How does this work in my life? How does this work for my other partners? Do I have the capacity and the time and the capability of being present to a new person without wounding my other people? There's a need for intentionality, which I think is just one of the skill sets that isn't necessarily taught within general monogamy culture. So people kind of jump in and they get all excited because it's really neat. And they don't do the prep work. And they don't go in slowly and carefully and with intention. They just kind of, it'll be wonderful. It'll be and bad things happen.
They dove in the pool forgetting they don't know how to swim. And so I guess, what was the difference with unicorns? Because I've heard that term, and again, Texas is its own world. So what I understood unicorns is somebody adding a third to but I could be completely wrong. So give me a better understanding of what a unicorn is, or what is unicorn?
Okay, so the unicorn hunter, was the what we refer to people looking for a unicorn. They tend to have a pretty bad reputation because a lot of damage tends to come from that model. But it's often the first step for general, and this happens in all iterations of gender. but it often happens with hetero couples.
That's what I've heard it used most.
The traditional story for a unicorn hunter is you got a hetero, generally monogamous couple. They think that poly sounds fun. They think ethical non-monogamy sounds exciting. Often the woman is maybe bisexual. And again, I'm being super heteronormative. This happens in all iterations, but this is sort of the stereotype for a reason. And, you know, she might be bi-curious, or she's bi, or her male partner is really into the idea of two women or whatever. So they decide to go like poly light. They decide to find, and a unicorn is basically, it's usually a bisexual single woman who is willing to fit herself into this narrow little slot that the monogamous couple has invented for them. So a lot of times the story when they're looking for for a unicorn is, well, we want to find somebody that doesn't threaten our relationship. They have to know we come first. Our marriage is the most important thing. And if she becomes a threat to us, she's gone immediately. She can't really make any requests because we've set out what our availability is, and she can fit in this hole, but she can't be any more or less. She needs to be equally attracted to both of us. She has to, you know, and they'll set rules sometimes, and it basically the rules are set because they're trying to, and it's understandable, it's just not gonna work usually. It's usually gonna be very damaging. I understand how they get there though. I have so much sympathy. It's basically, we want all the safety of monogamy while having a fun, hot, sexy person come in.
Yeah.
Usually want her to be polyfidelitous. They want her to not sleep with anybody but them because they don't want to risk STIs. They don't want her dating other people. Sometimes they can get very possessive. Maybe they want her to move in. You know, it can even be, you know, we really want I want a sister wife. I want, you know, a second wife, and she'll come and she'll help take care of the kids and she'll babysit sometimes. And also we get to have hot sex when we want to, except for when we don't want to, she's going to have to step out. It doesn't acknowledge this fantasy unicorn. And the reason we call it a unicorn is because it's a fantasy creature. It's not actually a living, breathing, whole human being with opinions or thoughts or needs. It's a character that we've invented that will allow us to have our fun while continuing to have the safety of a monogamous relationship.
Because even in a way, even if somebody enters that relationship, in a way they don't really have anywhere the same rights, and they're not really real in terms of personhood or rights within the relationship or things like that. They're not real in that instance. They're just, for lack of a better word, a toy in a way.
Exactly. And you know, it's complicated and it's nuanced. Of course. Because there are situations where a person may know what their limits are. And when we're able to communicate, here's what I have available. So for example, not all of the dynamics I just described, well, the one I described sounds horrible, but you know, there are dynamics that are reasonable, that are not unhealthy, where somebody says like, we have, you know, a home, we have like this relationship, our you know, marriage or whatever is really important to us. We're looking for somebody who would enjoy. Oh, that's so complicated.
I think I understand. It's somebody who would enjoy being with us, but doesn't necessarily want or need that full type of, because I've seen the relationship models where this is the couple, and then here's the one that's, I enjoy having with them. I enjoy being with them, but I'm still my own person separate from them.
And I think you hit on it. It's still being your own separate person. It's not having, and sometimes the unicorn thing, when we really talk about where it can go and where it can really go sideways, is that it gets very oppressive. And honestly, one of the issues is that as soon as it's not that people haven't managed to make this work, but it is very hard, and it really requires an enormous amount of exceptional luck to happen to find people that are like really, that fit in this dynamic. When you try to engineer a dynamic, it tends to go poorly and it tends to become coercive. So let's say you have a couple and they say, well, we're going to date, but we're going to only date together. So that means anybody that they date has to like them both, has to feel the same. That rarely happens.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we get lucky, but when people decide to date as a couple, it puts this huge emotional pressure on everybody involved. So one person may not be as engaged. So you might have, a couple, and one of them is real, and I love my finger puppets. I love my finger puppets. But you got like one person who's really into it and one person who isn't. And this person's really into it, but this person kind of feels like they have to be okay with it. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, they're like the gatekeeper and they're standing in the way of the fun, and they need to be okay so that everyone won't be mad at them. Mm-hmm. You've got the unicorn over here who's like, wow, I'm really interested and attracted to one of these people, and the other person I'm not, but now that we've been dating, I'm emotionally invested in this one person, and now I have to show up. I have to be available sexually and emotionally to somebody I'm maybe not there with, or I'm out in the cold. Mm-hmm. Very hard for people to feel like they have agency and autonomy in a situation where they can get the boot if they don't have the correct emotions and the correct availability. There are times when, I dated a woman who loved calling herself a unicorn. Uh-huh. And that was magic and luck. That was a situation where it happens when you're dating separately, you're dating as individuals. Actually for me, I remember dating a gentleman, and then I met his wife, and she was amazing. And we had such a lovely time, all of us together, because we started dating separately, and then we got really lucky. Uh-huh. There was no version, there was no expectation, there was no pressure. It was just, oh wow, you're really cute and fun and interesting, and maybe we should make out too. But even in that situation, it was never me dating the two of them. It was 3 distinct individual relationships that happened to enjoy sometimes sharing space.
Yeah.
When you have a couple that has preeminent position, it just naturally puts the other person in sort of in a very emotionally dangerous, tenuous position. And it rarely goes as well as people would hope it would.
Mm-hmm. Because that person has feelings. And
and I do want to say there are times where it's okay to have boundaries.
Oh yeah.
And this is where it gets conversations around couples privilege, around unicorn hunting, gets a little bit gray, is that it is absolutely okay to be in a relationship and say, hey, okay, so I'm just going to use myself for an example. I have kids, I have a house, I have my partners, I have my life the way it is, and I love the way my life is structured. If I were to meet somebody, another person, right now I don't know how I would manage that without fall and everything, but if I met somebody wonderful and we wanted to start dating, and they were to say to me, hey, I really like you and I have really deep feelings for you and I want more. I'd like us to live together. I'd like to have kids together. I want more of your time. I'm not available for that. Mm-hmm. And that's something I'm going to communicate right up front. I don't owe them more of me than I have to give just because they want it, right? Uh-huh. So you've got, like in the unicorn example, you've got somebody who's like, hey, I know I came in for like fun and giggles every once in a while, but actually I want to move in and, I want us to all be a big happy family. If the other two people aren't in agreement individually as human beings, that's okay. It's not that boundaries are bad. It's not that setting, this is what I'm available for. It might be, I'm available for a monthly play session. I'm mm-hmm. available for like a deep, loving, pair bonded connection. Whatever it is, the boundaries are okay. But each person has to have the freedom and the agency to kind of speak up for themselves, to let their desires and needs be known, and to make the decision of where they want to go with it. Mm-hmm. I think that's the important part, is people have agency, and in the unicorn hunting kind of thing,
that there does not get it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, that is so. I've read several books on polyamory, and they're fantastic. I did read The Ethical Slut. There was another one that kind of put things out in the nitty-gritty. I think it's More Than Two is the other book I read.
More Than Two is, I want to say about More Than Two really quickly is, sorry to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
More Than Two is an 80% amazing book. I really love it. It's 20% really problematic. There's actually a lot of drama around. There's been some stuff around it.
Tell us.
Well, I don't want to misspeak, but basically, there were two authors, and one of the authors realized later and has since written a really wonderful essay called, I think, What I Got Wrong in More Than Two, or something like that. Yeah. Definitely worth, basically, I think if you're going to read More Than Two, you need to read that essay first. The book has gotten a questionable reputation because, according to the stories that have come out, one of the authors may have some not great patterns, not great habits, and it kind of comes out in the subtext of the book, and may have actually done a bit of damage to their partners. And that there's a dynamic that runs through the book that is a little problematic, and I'll explain what it is. But I still think there's a lot of value in the book, but I do think it needs to be taken with a grain of sand. Grain of sand. How about?
Honestly, I translated in my head.
It's the grain shape.
I'm in a little grain shape, and they're both salty.
A little bit of grit. Exactly. There's an undercurrent in the book of not taking ownership for your own emotional. Apparently, there was a lot of triangulation that happened. So people saying things like, well, if you're upset, that's because you're not evolved enough. I'm being honest. I'm being very clear about what I want. And then it's almost like gaslighting. So the partner feels like, I feel unseen. I feel unmet. I feel like weird stuff is going on. I feel like there's manipulation. But every time I'm sad or try to express that something hurts or feels bad, I'm being told it's because I'm not enlightened enough. Or I'm just, I need, there's a phrase that comes up sometimes, and I haven't heard it so much recently, thank goodness, but people saying things like, look, I'm not responsible for your feelings. So if you're hurting, that's on you. Which is kind of true.
It is kind of, I had an argument with that with an ex. Yeah. I've had an argument with that with one of my exes. I was like, well, yes, I am responsible for my feelings, but the actions you decide to do that spur those feelings also have to be taken into account. Anyway, but
it's a yes and, right? There are times where our needs, our boundaries, where we are may make another person sad, and that has to be okay. So for example, again, I'm dating somebody and they want more of me than I have to give. That might make them really sad. It might make them really upset. They might have thought, I really want to be with this person, and she's not available, and that makes me mad and sad and upset. I can feel sympathy, I can feel empathy, but it isn't my job to change to make them feel better.
Yeah, because in the end, you'll probably be hurting more people in that process, trying to be something that you are not currently capable of giving.
Exactly. And we get to set boundaries. However, our choices do impact people. So if we're behaving in a way that is dismissive or not present, we're not showing up, we're triangulating people, we're, one of the things that I think came up from what I read about the book, and I'm trying to not malign it, but one of the undercurrents that I kind of heard was that, and what I caught in the book, one of my concerns when I was reading the book before I even heard about the kerfuffle was kind of my
favorite word.
I know, right? But the person who's sort of at the hinge, so you've got a hinge partner, you've got two other partners, and the hinge partner can end up sort of almost setting up a custody battle situation where they're like, well, you guys figure out who I should be with. And I'll just, you guys, basically you two duke it out and you guys figure out your feelings. And then I'll just be here and be happy and have all the love. And you guys can figure out, you guys can do all the work and the labor of
figuring who gets me.
Exactly. And that's a situation which is going to wound people. And that person's choice to not take ownership over their own emotional landscape, the inability to take responsibility for stating, maintaining boundaries is going to actively wound those other people. So in that case, yeah, you're absolutely responsible for the feeling that you're giving other people. You're making choices that could potentially wound people. So yeah, anyway, you were mentioning More Than Two. It is a really good book. There's so much good in it, but I think that the book de-emphasizes personal responsibility. It also de-emphasizes, and I'm going on about it, I think it de-emphasizes the value and the legitimacy of emotional pain. So transitioning from monogamy to polyamory often involves a good amount of pain. It is a hard shift to make for a number of reasons. I think it's wonderful and worth it. It can be for the right people. Not for everyone, but there's pain because we're working through something hard. There's, I remember, I'd been poly for a really long time, but when my partner with whom I'd been monogamous had their first overnight with somebody else, despite my years of having been poly, despite my deep philosophical connection to polyamory, despite the fact that I was the one who instigated the shift, the first time there was an overnight, I cried like a baby. I had so much pain. It was really hard, which is fine because that was part of my crucible at that moment. That was pain in the process of becoming and growing into the person that I wanted to be. But then there's pain when you are being, not all pain is that. Not all pain is stuff that you're you need to be able to face and fight through and become bigger than. Sometimes pain is your body or your mind's way of telling you something is wrong and you are not being treated well. And learning to be able to decipher when it's a legitimate warning and when it's fear is a process of trial and error. It takes time, it's hard, but we can't minimize pain and just say, oh, that's just something, if you feel bad or hurt or jealous or insecure or abandoned, that's clearly just your stuff to deal with. Maybe it is, and maybe it's not. Maybe you are being abandoned. Maybe you are being sidelined. Maybe there is something that isn't in alignment yet. And
No, and I love having that perspective on a book that I have read in conjunction with other books and other resources and podcasts. Because at the time when I was dating this person, he was like, I would like to be polyamorous eventually. From the get-go, he said he was. I was like, you know what? We've fallen in love with each other. Let me do the research, because that's the kind of human being I am. And let me see if this is something that I feel that I can grow into and allow my heart to open like that. And doing the research, and then we were ethically non-monogamous together, where we would play with other people together sexually. And that first time we played sexually with somebody else was that moment that I knew this man I can do this with. Because the entire time it never felt, because I'd never been in that type of open anything sexually with a partner. And it was that moment while we're in the heat of it, and he looks at me and he says, I love you. And the whole instance was that moment where I realized that this didn't feel like anything out of the norm. I knew he still loved me while we're still having fun with this other person. And it never felt like anything was out of the ordinary for us or for what we were doing. And we never made the other person feel like they're less than because they joined us for this evening. But the entire time, it just felt something so natural. Afterwards, when we were all just sitting enjoying some snacks and watching movies, it was that moment this was okay. This was great. It never felt like anything that was traumatizing for me. But I knew that also, because of who that person, other person I was dating at the time is, he is honest to a fault. He does not lie. And I knew that his love for me was his love for me. And we were doing this, it was fun. And this was something that just didn't feel like it was any big old deal. So that was one of those things of learning in that process. So back to the original topic, was More Than Two was one of the books that I read in conjunction with all of these other material, YouTube videos, podcasts, and realizing like, okay, this is something I know I could potentially do with the right partner, you know?
That's beautiful. I love it when people do their research. And yeah, and again, More Than Two is like, I use it often in my work. There's a couple things I've shamelessly stolen. I mean, I always give credit, but there are some things in that book that I just think are invaluable. So,
And I'm glad that you shed that light on that.
I love how you guys went about it. That's such a beautiful, and it so depends on the people involved. I said that polyamory is just kind of almost always going to be challenging. It doesn't always have to be.
No.
And it should be, and it shouldn't. It's usually the most challenging when people are going from a strongly monogamous mode into polyamory. There's that like, I always think of it as like juddering gears, like into
don't forget to click the clutch.
Exactly. It grinds a little bit on the way in, but when it is working, and when the people involved are honest and present and the communication is good, it is beautiful.
It is. Honestly, it truly is. And like with that relationship, we did not last, but we did not end badly. We just both realized, you know what? We both had to do. We were both on the phone. I worked between Houston and San Antonio, and we were just talking now, and we both would be like, this, I think we are not for the long haul. And we were both tearing up, but we both said, I love you. He's like, we loved each other, but we just knew that we weren't for a long. We're now still friends. We occasionally check in on each other. It was not a breakup, one of those bad breakups. It was just one of those like, our time has come. And honestly, I was always speak the accolades of that ex, because it was one of those just things like, we were a season, and it was a beautiful season. And thank you for that season. He's now remarried, but he's married. But it was that, I always look back on that time of growth for me, of seeing what am I capable of, but this beautiful basic summer of, well, actually a winter of just this fantastic love that I had for about 6-7 months. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. That is just beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, honestly, and sharing all of yourself.
I love this. I love these kind of conversations. This is really fun.
So do I. I find this one, I think a lot of people, which is why I've created this chance for people to see the different lives that are possible from people that are not big celebrities and things like that. Just all of us have fantastic, beautiful, even the person says my life is totally boring. I'm like, your life is more than likely not boring. You just got to remember how to tell your story.
I love that. That is beautiful.
Thank you. I think everybody's fantastically fascinating. We're all such complex little beings, little mammals, that people always try. That's when I do the topic on TikTok when people talk about gender, and I'm like, why are we limited such this incredibly complex creature? I mean, if you look outside your window at the city that's before you, it's an incredibly complex thing that we have created. Why can't that complexity be mirrored in our own minds? And why don't we let it be? And in complexity is beauty. And so I love being able to show people like you.
When I was in my late teens, early 20s, I had a job with basically with the Sierra Club. I was one of those people that harassed people door to door, asking for their time. This is terrible, but I loved that job. So it was exhausting, and I made like very little money, but I was doing good work for the environment. But the thing that I really loved was going to people's doors and getting to see a glimpse. Every night I just got to go to 100 different doors and talk to 100 different people, and be just for a few minutes. And sometimes I get to get little glimpses of their lives and their homes, and
like a little peek through their door.
Oh my God, it's kind of like taking a walk and looking through people's windows when you're just like, oh, look at that well-lit open window.
I do that. I do that.
I love it. And now I think, like with my job now, There is nothing in the world that makes me happier. Like on a regular basis, I text my partners and I'll just like, they'll get texts on a lot where I'm just like, I love my job. And their response, both of them are just like, did you just have a session? Yes. I'm going to say, but I love my job because I get to spend like the vast majority of my time talking to really lovely people who are going through challenging times. And if they call me, I get people only call me if they're actively trying to work through something challenging. And if they are putting in intention and thought and care, and they're being strategic, and I'm probably repeating myself, they're being thoughtful in their process. And, sometimes I talk to people who have definitely, they've gotten into the deep end of the pool and things have gone catastrophically awry. But, and then we get to see like, okay, how do we get out of this? How do we fix this? How do we come through this crucible more whole than you were going in? And it's the biggest source of, like, I get like choked up. It's the biggest source of joy in my life that people are willing to share with me and talk with me and work through these challenges. It's so inspiring. From the outside, you don't always get to see how, people have their front on, they have the images on there, you get to see little snippets of who they are, and you don't always get to see who they are. Mm-hmm. And I feel like my work, and also what you do, is this beautiful process of getting to actually see who people are. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing that is more of an honor, I think. It's such a source of joy.
I fully agree with you. I fully agree. The amount of lives I've been able to see in just this short time, both here on this show and then just on TikTok in general, just being able to see, it is really eye-opening to both the problems we have in this country and both the joys. And I tell people there's more love in this world than there is hate. It's just the hate is louder. Because most acts of love are quiet. Washing dishes for your partner, or buying them a little gift, or getting them flowers at the grocery store. These are quiet acts of love that people don't even see, but they happen thousands and thousands of times a day in countless different towns and cities across the country. Multiply that by millions. The acts of hate are so minuscule, they're just louder.
That is such a perceptive point, because also often loud acts of love, they're, that sort of, standing on the lawn in the rain with the slap on your head, it's not actually healthy.
No.
That is such a perceptive concept. Love is, I was just about to echo exactly what you said. I just think that's
no, go ahead. And it was one of those things I had over whenever because I have been single for the past almost 3 years now, intentionally so, after my relationship that did not survive pandemic. But it was this intentional realization to not allow bitterness take hold of me, especially around Valentine's Day. But it was that realization of all of these little acts of love happen every day, but they're not these big things. Like you were saying, those big showcasey types of, like, with the boombox, in a lot of instances are more manipulative than they are an attempt to actually express love. There are those big loud acts of love that are intentionally like, I'm just so excited to be in love with this person, and those do happen. However, those small acts of love, I had that realization as I was walking through the grocery store, HEB here in Texas. It's a religious institution as well as a grocery store. It's a way of life here. But just walking around and seeing all the Valentine's Day presents, I think it was two or 3 days before Valentine's Day, and just seeing and just finding joy in seeing these tons of different people buying these things of chocolate, these roses, these flowers. And I don't know who those are going to. Are they going to go to their boyfriend? Are they going to their wife? Or are they going to go to their friend who is also single? Like, these are all acts of resounding, beautiful little sparks of love, of little glimpses in people's lives. I just found that just so joyful. I was like, oh, I love that. So I still love Valentine's Day, even though I've been single. But that allowed me to realize, like, why am I going to be bitter because this person has love and I don't? Why can't I just be part of that joy of like, oh my God, this person has love, and that is beautiful, you know?
And I think part of that is your heart has love.
Mm-hmm.
You're not, when we are, of course, having partnership is beautiful. Finding somebody with whom you connect is a beautiful miracle. It's such a special thing, but it's not, that isn't what gives us value. Our value is innate. Our value is intrinsic. And you have love in you. You just, I mean, okay, we've been talking for, I don't know, half an hour or something. And like, you are clearly like beaming love. So in that, you can be present with yourself and have joy and have connection without it having to, like, I think that's one of the things that just reflecting on polyamory a little bit. Polyamory is more, hopefully I can tie this together and make this make sense. Polyamory is way more than about just dating people. To me, polyamory, you could be monogamous and still embrace what I think are the fundamental precepts of polyamory. To me, polyamory is more about, it's not even about the dating. It's like a fundamental philosophical shift. And it's about living wholeheartedly and completely and autonomously. And when I say autonomous, I don't mean autonomous in like a restrictive, pushing away, insular way. I mean like as a complete and whole person. Mm-hmm. So I remember talking to somebody who said, polyamory sounded really interesting. They really loved the idea about it. It philosophically made so much sense. But they said the idea of dating more than one person sounds absolutely exhausting. They're like, I'm fine with my partner dating. I don't care. But I don't want to have to date. And I feel like if I'm going to be poly, I have to date a bunch of people. And like, I don't want to. And it's like, don't.
Yeah.
That's your autonomy. That's you getting to decide where you want to put your energy and where your joy is. And so sometimes people like get into poly and they're like, I need to go find 6 partners right now. And it's like, no. You need to be, part of the process is becoming complete and whole in yourself so that you can, like, I don't know, this is a little bit rambly, but do you mind if I?
Go ahead. No, I'm loving every second of it.
So, if any of my clients ever see this, they're going to be like, oh, Magenta always says this. One of the standard monogamy narratives, and again, monogamy can be wonderful, not trash talking monogamy, but one of the standard narratives anyway, is that you meet somebody wonderful, and then you do whatever you can to get from here, meet person, to the capital R relationship box. Because that's like the epitome. That's how you know you have value, that you have worth, that your life has a meaning, is because somebody else said that you're great and decided to get in that box with you, and now you count. And now you're safe. And people will do whatever they can to get in that box and stay in that box, because it's like the box becomes more important than the people in the box. And so people will like contort themselves. They will twist themselves into knots to get in that box and stay there. And again, not all monogamy, but this happens a lot where people they'll twist themselves out of form, off of their center. And it creates kind of this codependent need, because the need is to keep the box in one piece. And the box is an illusion. The box is, the reality is you're together out of choice because you have decided to be together. What I think, rather than having this narrative where you find somebody and then you twist yourself in knots into like keeping that capital R relationship in one piece, what I want to see is people coming to each other from their full centered place of self and saying, here's who I am and what I have to offer, what I'm looking for. And the other person says, and here's who I am and what I have to offer. And we see where the Venn diagram overlaps. And at no point is anybody trying to twist themselves into it or to make themselves bigger or smaller or warp themselves, because we're just seeing, how are we compatible with each other? What works for us? What form do we fit well together in? And instead of it being like here to here, where there's this like clear indicator of value, now we're together, we're monogamous, whatever, so now we are more important. Instead, it's like a lateral movement. We meet somebody wonderful and we see, how do we fit together? We fit really well. Like, let's try this. Let's try that. Oh, wow. We don't live well together, but we're really good together in this way. We're fantastic friends. We're, fantastic play buddies. We find out where we fit without anybody having to contort themselves out of shape or be anything other than who they are in their fullness of self. The dating part, if that's important to you, then that's important to you. And then that's part of you existing in your fullness of self. If it's not, then it's not. That it almost feels, to me, the idea, the underlying philosophies of polyamory make the dating aspect weirdly almost irrelevant.
Yes, I can see.
That was a bit of a rant.
Oh no, I love it. I loved every second of it. And so I guess to kind of shake things up a tiny bit, what type of dates does a polyamory coach enjoy being taken on or taking others on? This is a fun one.
That's fun. Oh my gosh. Can I just talk about my partners?
Of course, please.
So I have two partners and they are marvelous. It's actually really funny. I met them both the same week. I had been married, and I will say we did not, we had a wonderful run, and not because of polyamory. Sometimes people are like, being a relationship coach with a divorce under my belt wasn't the loveliest thing in the world. But sometimes we find, as you were saying with that wonderful partner you were talking about, sometimes you find that things are you're no longer in that place with each other. But at a long time ago, I don't know, it was like 7 years ago, I guess. I don't know, something like that. So it wasn't that long ago. But I realized some of my relationship with my then husband was going just beautifully. But a couple of my other relationships kind of had, like nothing terrible, but I was, not dating a lot. And I started realizing I was feeling sad about it. And I tend to be very goal oriented. So I went on something like 30 dates in a month.
Oh my
God. I went on a lot of dates. It was intense. Had a lot of free time. But I was trying to find people that I really connected to. And I got really lucky and I met both of my partners that I'm still with on like the same week. Totally lucked out. But it's so fun because the relationships are so different and our date times are so different. One of them, our lives are actually like very, very intertwined. We see each other a ton. He comes and hangs out with me and the kids. There's, he is part of like the structural foundation of how my life works. When my ex is with the kids, my ex comes and stays at my house so that our kids don't have to bounce back and forth. And I go stay at one of my partner's places so that it's a little bit of bouncing, but it's nice for the kids. And I go stay at one of my partner's house and we just have like, for a mom with two kids and a business and all the things I'm doing, he just makes every other weekend into this like art bacchanal. It's great. There's a certain amount of imbibing,
of course,
lovely things, and like museums, and I write music and he creates art, and we discuss all of because we're both artists, we're both got a lot of stuff going on, so we're always just talking and plotting and eating and imbibing and being hedonistic, and it's this wonderful, like, it's like getting a little like a serious vacation twice a month. I am so lucky. And my other partner is just lovely and so cute. And he's married and very, very introverted. And one of the things he had said at one point, he's like, I could actually be happy with like one partner or whatever. He's like, I want to be a couple of people's quarter partner. Because he's like, I'm introverted. I don't have a ton of like, he gets a lot of his joy out of squirreling away and working on his projects. And his wife and I are both, we're a lot more out there. And so it's just like very low key. Our dates are just really sweet, and we eat a lot and we talk a lot. And it's just, we only see each other maybe once a month. During the entire pandemic, it was terrible because I was really bubbled because of my kids and my partner's needs.
Mm-hmm.
He and his wife, my other partner and his wife, had a lot more freedom. So for like 2 years, our entire relationship was like him coming over to my house, and we'd like sit 6 feet apart and occasionally like reach out and touch toes. But somehow it was fine. And it was just like half of our dates involve us sitting around talking about how great our other partners are.
Oh,
I love being with people who talk mushy about their other partners. It makes me super, super happy. I just like talk. I mean, I love going dancing and I love eating good food, but I could just walk and talk with people for days. That's where my happy place is. It doesn't suck that they're both super cute.
That's a wonderful little perk, I would say.
I'm pleased.
And that just all sounds so beautiful. And when I went to San Francisco, it was like peeking into a different world. I did a whole TikTok on it about the difference about living in Texas and being queer and dressing the way I do versus being in San Francisco and being hit on at a leather store by these leather daddies. And I'm in a full skirt, muscle shirt, like a shawl, jewelry, where here in San Antonio, would not happen with men that present that way.
Mm-hmm.
But there it was like, I was like, oh.
The kink scene here, I'm all like, talk about like, sitting and having lovely conversations. The kink scene here is so good. And the queer scene and the like, honestly, like within the kink scene around here, it like, there are no places in my book that feel safer and more enjoyable and at ease, and people are so, of course there's nonsense, of course there are jerks everywhere, but in general it is so easy here to be whatever the hell you want to be. Sometimes it's almost a little wonky. Like I remember one of my kids is trans, and when they were little and they I need to make sure it's okay with them that I'm sharing any of their story.
It's okay.
I'm actually going to pause on that conversation.
That is perfectly fine.
When they were little, I was in the habit of just being like, and then this happened, and then that happened. But I think that might not be entirely respectful of my kids. So,
and I tell you, we can.
People are great. It is such a special place, and yeah, you can just be yourself, and people embrace you.
Yeah, it was beautiful, and I was like, let me see how much it would cost to live. I was like, oh.
Yeah, one of my kids and I were talking about that, and they're like, we could go somewhere else. They're like, it's so expensive here, and it's like, yeah, but we are actively choosing this.
Honestly, if I was telling one of my friends, like, what would you do to move? It was like, if I had to find a way to find another partner to me and them move, we would do it. Just jokingly. But no, it was the amount of freedom. Like, yes, in San Francisco, is there the fear that I could potentially get mugged? Absolutely. But that's true of any major city.
Yeah, that's true.
But there was none of that fear about just me being me at all. It was the first time in all of my life where I had that moment of like, where is that? Where's that hypervigilance? Like, yes, I had to be vigilant. Like, is somebody going to like try to get my wallet? Absolutely. But where's this hypervigilance that I experienced in Texas? And having to communicate with somebody, I had somebody who showed me a very wonderful all the wonderful enjoyments of San Francisco, and gave me a fantastic tour of San Francisco. But having this conversation of the differences in the realities of where I come from versus where he is, because he's lived there his whole life, he was like, "Oh wow, I thought that was just." I was like, "No, babe." And he was like, "Oh," I was like, "I don't ever want you to experience living in Texas. Yes, it's cheap. I have a 2-bedroom, 1,200 square foot apartment, almost close to downtown, centrally located, built in 1920, beautiful condition. Doesn't have central air and heat, but I'm warm-blooded, so I'm fine. $1,100 a month."
I'm sorry, I can't talk to you anymore. I have to cry now.
But that is the one thing, you know. But I was like, if I can make enough money, I'd be like, you know what, this is the life I want to live. At the drop of a hat. But it was such a beautiful. When I think of San Francisco, it was just beautiful expression of being, like you said, who you want to be. And I thought that was just absolutely just exquisite. And I've been to New York, and can you have that there in New York? Yes. But I've never seen the purest form of that ness as I did in San Francisco. And I've been all over the country because I love road tripping. It's the funnest thing for me. I pop on an audiobook, and next thing you know, I'm in Idaho.
Yeah, same.
It really is. But yes, and so less about me, more about you.
I like talking.
Huh?
I said I like your stories.
Oh, thank you. But we're here interviewing your beautifulness. So let me see. Hold on. We'll go into the next segment because my patrons on Patreon have the most wonderful questions in a way that I cannot. And of course, you can decline to answer any of these questions at any time.
Bring it.
So let's get in. So, and if anybody watching or listening to this, if you want to be able to ask questions of my fantastic guests, you can become a patron at patreon.com/Shining Nathan. And so, my patron, Auntie Kinky, says, oh wait, hold on. She was making a statement.
Oh.
Here we go. Lotus Lane asks about the different styles of poly kitchen table, garden party, parallel, and what makes them healthy for different people and relationships.
I love that.
Talk a little bit about poly breakups because they don't hear anybody actually talk about poly breakups.
Excellent. Okay, let's see. To start with the different types of polyamory, there are so many different ways to do poly, right? There is no prescriptive version of poly. But kitchen table poly means you could all sit around the kitchen table together and have dinner together. It's often means sort of it can be very intertwined. Everybody hangs out together. Everybody spends time together. Sometimes it doesn't mean like necessarily triads but it can be just everybody who's involved. We call it, like, some people refer to it as a polycule, which I like that term because it's so visual. You know, to that person who's dating that person. And it kind of just, kitchen table poly is a lovely dynamic when it happens organically, where everyone can just feel super comfortable together. The one thing I want to say is that kitchen table poly is wonderful when it happens organically. Trying to force kitchen table poly is very similar to trying to force like the unicorn situation. Not everybody gets along. We can't force people. We can't make it obligatory that everybody wants to hang out together. There are also poly folks who are like, they love being poly, but they don't necessarily want to. There's different levels of comfort, right? Some people are like, yeah, I know my partner's sleeping with other people, but I don't really want to see it. And other people are like, let's all climb into bed together. So I love kitchen table poly. I think it's wonderful when that works out beautifully. It's certainly something that we can aspire to or, put energy towards. But I do think we need to keep it in mind that people need to be able to settle in where is most comfortable for them to be. On the other end of that, well, there's lots of different, so there's kitchen table poly. Then, there are things like on the opposite end is don't ask, don't tell. And that is, I have seen it work. There's a little part of me that's not entirely sure what the longevity of that would be. Don't ask, don't tell is basically like, I know you have other partners, but I don't want to know about them. I don't want to see them. I'm going to pretend we're monogamous. Ooh. And like just shut my mind off of what's happening over there. I never want to say that something can't work, because there are absolutely people out there who have made that work, and it's what feels best to them. And I don't want to denigrate that. People need to find their best landing points. In general, don't ask, don't tell implies, or to me indicates, there may be less comfort with it. That can be somebody really doesn't want to be poly, but they're tolerating it. It can also be dynamics where it's like, yes, we're poly right now, but I'm hoping that eventually that will go away. If I ignore it long enough, it'll go away. Don't ask, don't tell also is, runs a high risk. If you start dating somebody who's in a don't ask, don't tell situation, there is a high risk that it's not actually a don't ask, don't tell. It's that they don't know you exist.
Period. Or that this is happening at all.
Sometimes people who are actually cheating be like, oh, I'm in a don't ask, don't tell. That's why you can't meet my partner or come over to my house or call me at certain times. And it's like, no, actually, this is just screwing around.
Yeah.
The other end of very, very big red flags. But there's parallel poly, where I'm just trying to think of like the different terms that come up. Parallel poly is like, I know there are other people, that's totally fine, but we don't really interact with each other. Sometimes that's, I wouldn't say that I'm in a parallel poly, but my two partners, we've all partied together, we've all hung out together, but it doesn't happen very often. Like, well, before the pandemic, we'd all hang out maybe once every couple months or whatever, when I threw like a party. But in general, when I'm with my one partner, I tend to get very hyper focused on my partners. I love one-on-one time. I love going to parties and dances and stuff too, but I really, really love having time to just hyper focus on my partner. So like when I'm with one partner, we're hanging out. And when I'm with my other partner, we're hanging out. And that is kind of a parallel-ish dynamic, although it's not like a rigid kind of thing. I think garden party was the other one that got mentioned. That's like, maybe you wouldn't have dinner together. Maybe it's not like we all live together and we all like snuggle up on the couch and watch a movie together, but we can all mingle.
Okay.
Like you see each other at events. We might, if somebody throws a housewarming party, everybody shows up. I personally love those dynamics because I love it when my partners like each other. I love it when people feel comfortable with each other. So the term compersion means a feeling of joy and warmth that you get when you see your partner happy. In this context, where the term comes from, happy with another partner. To me, compersion is bigger than that too. It's just like when you see your partner being happy with something that doesn't involve you. So it's not like I'm happy because they're into me, but I'm happy because they're into what is bringing them joy. Compersion is, I will admit, way easier when you like and understand your partner's other partners. It's harder to be super enthusiastic when you're like, I don't know why you're dating that person. They're awful. You still have to respect it. And that's why I think forcing kitchen table is problematic. There are times where it's like, see, I get a little rambly, but a little tangent. There was a point where I've been on different sides of this. There was a point where one of my partners was dating somebody who was very difficult for me to be around. She seemed absolutely terrified of me all the time. It was very uncomfortable. I tried really hard. I had some concerns. I remember talking to my partner and I said, listen, I have a few concerns. Are you open to hearing them? Because we have to remember our partners are autonomous, complete adult people. Just because we're in love with each other and just because we have like a deeply entwined relationship doesn't mean that I get to tell them what to do or tell them how to feel or think or how to perceive the world. I don't even get to make them listen to my opinions, but I can say like, hey, are you open? Like, I'm seeing some things. And I said, here are the things I'm seeing. And my partner said, I totally get what you're saying, but I know them better than you do. And they're really great when you're not around. They were like, honestly, you'd like her when you're not around. And I was like, I believe you. I believe that.
Yeah.
And it was a matter of, it wasn't about like, well, you need to stop dating her, or I need to start like forcing myself to like feel comfortable. I think we both really tried, and we didn't jive, and that was fine. Yeah. It was like, I respect you to my partner. I respect you. I respect your opinions. I respect your capacity to make your own decisions. Let's not try to make us hang out together. Kitchen table poly, at least at this point, I'm not saying it never could, but kitchen table poly at this moment, the more we push, the worse it's going to get.
Yeah.
But when, it is the best when you meet somebody and you meet their partners and you're like my married partner, his wife is amazing. She's like this incredibly talented jeweler. She's like cute as a button, really amazing. Like, I'm a little in awe of her. So that was great, because I met her and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I want to be your friend. So that is the most fun. When it happens.
Oh yeah, I think everything needs to happen organically as well. Because if not, if you force it, people are going to be humans, and humans can tend to be cats sometimes.
The minute obligation becomes a part of the conversation, it's just like, again, with the whole unicorn hunting. Something that often happens, especially in the being super heteronormative again, but like when you've got a situation where you've got a bi-curious woman, and then and a guy who really wants a threesome with two women, and being a little sarcastic there. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's super fun. If it's forced, nothing is less sexy than feeling like I better be attracted to that person or I'll disappoint people.
Yeah.
I'm going to go out and have dinner with this person and I better want to fuck him. I don't care how amazing they are. The minute there's that thought that like I'm obligated to feel a certain kind of way, we'll never feel that way.
Yeah. I fully agree with you, and I fully understand that. And so I guess on the second part of the question, talk about poly breakups, because no one ever does.
Okay, so poly breakups are, where to start with that? So there's a couple of different things. So one of them, and I'm actually going to go back to something that I really appreciated, that reminded me of something that you were saying, actually a lot what I was saying about my ex, something that Dan Savage had talked about at one point, where he was saying, I'm going to misquote it terribly, but it was basically the idea that in our standard relationship narrative, a relationship isn't successful until somebody dies. If the relationship ends and somebody is dead before the relationship ends, then it's a success. Even if the couple was like, and I'm now like, I'm improving on more, I'm expanding. But, even if the relationship was miserable and unhappy and just sucked the life out of both of them for 60 years, as long as they stayed together until one of them croaks, it is a resounding success. Some relationships are a perfect success. They are a beautiful relationship, and they don't have to end with death to have been a wonderful relationship. It's okay for people to realize, and it can be really heartbreaking and difficult, certainly. But it is okay for people to recognize that they are no longer compatible. And like, I remember talking to somebody once, and they said, because I was saying, often I'm a romantic. The whole reason I do my job is I'm a romantic. I always think there's some way of looking at the situation to find a way that works. To go back to, I said, you make that Venn diagram. I always picture that overlap as like a crystal, and you can kind of remove it from the Venn diagram, and you can like move it in different directions.
Yeah.
Dimensional thing, and be like, oh, here's where you guys connect. Here's how it can work. We just had to like shift the perspective a little.
Yeah.
So that's always my first motive, or my first inclination is like, let's see where, right now it feels like you're missing each other completely. Let's see where there is a healthy connection. And the person said, what if we get to a point where they were monogamous, and she's like, what if we get to a point and our non-negotiables become too different? What if at the end of this poly journey, we find that we aren't compatible and we want things that don't work? And that the thing is, that can happen, whether you're poly or monogamous. Sometimes we find ourselves no longer compatible with people that we dearly, dearly love. And I think that we need to remember that the individuals in the relationship, their wholeness, their sense of self is more important than the box of the relationship. So it can be heartbreaking and sad, and you need to like make space for that, but it is okay to realize that you aren't compatible. Neither person should have to bend themselves out of form, off of their center, to keep that relationship in one piece. That being said, sometimes with poly folks, when they break up, they try to get very philosophical about it, you know, kind of that conscious uncoupling. And, you know, I hear people say things like, you know, yes, it was a 20-year deeply committed relationship, but now, you know, we've decided to transition our relationship into a different format and everything's fine and we're really great and we're just being friends now. And it's like, good. Are we skipping the grief part?
Yeah.
Right. Sometimes that's where you're at. I'm not like, sometimes that is a fully authentic place to be. You know, sometimes by the time you figure out it's time to part ways, you're both like, I love you so much, let's never do this again.
Yeah.
Really happy and they throw a party, right?
Yeah.
Party young. But it's also okay to grieve. And I think sometimes poly folks, I think we want to be really philosophic. We want to really be open to where life takes us, and I'm trying to figure out how to put words to it. We minimize the reality of the hurt of losing someone. Losing a relationship can be incredibly painful, and it can be complicated when you're poly. So I'll talk a little bit about my breakup. With my divorce, it was a surprise. Again, being a poly coach, a relationship coach with not just a divorce, a complete surprise divorce. My favorite thing. It really knocked me for a loop, but clearly we were no longer right for each other. I had not come to that place. I had not figured that out. And it was an interesting dynamic because I had my two other partners who both very much loved my husband, my ex-husband. There were all these interesting things that happened. Like, for example, you know, everybody had their relationship dynamics were very settled and comfortable. And when my ex made his exit, there were these dynamics that we had to be very intentional about. Like, one of my kids had gone to one of my partners and it said, like, they knew I was really sad because I was devastated for a really long time. And they came up to one of my partners and they're like, you have to marry my mother. And the thought was that they were thinking was like, you make mom happy. Like, she's so sad. And like, when she's with you, she's really happy. And they really liked him and he was family. So it was like, there's a role that's open. So there can be an inclination to like jump in and fill that role. But just because there was a role and just because somebody else filled that role doesn't mean that that's how you two fit. So one has to be thoughtful and slow and careful in the process so that you're not making big decisions or reactive decisions when there's suddenly a hole in the relationship. I think there's a certain level. I've been on all the sides of both being comforted while having a broken heart and comforting a partner while they had a broken heart. Can be complex too. One of the things we have to know, okay, in the monogamy narrative, we have these ideas that so somebody gets divorced or their partner dies or something awful happens. And there's this idea that they need to completely get over what came before they're allowed to have another relationship. So when you get into another relationship, you need to be over your ex. If you're still like hung up on your ex, then you're not, like, as though there's one spot in our hearts for a relationship and you got to like clean that stuff out before you add somebody new into the spot. In reality, we are complicated and our feelings are complicated. We can be, as I was, madly, passionately, joyfully in love with these incredible people. And like one of my partners, they were both incredible. One of my partners, just, my God, they put a lot of work in. They supported the hell out of me, and that relationship was so meaningful and so beautiful. That didn't fix my broken heart at all. It didn't. I think it made the divorce a lot better. I can't imagine. It's a funny thing to say, but I can't imagine that devastation without, I don't know how I would have survived that devastation without the love of my partners. It sounds crippling because it was crippling. Having that love supporting me through it I am so grateful to have had that. But it's important for I'm being a little haphazard with this, but I supported one of my partners actually was going through an incredibly devastating breakup when we started dating. So part of us starting to date was actually me supporting him through his breakup. And so we're falling madly in love, and there's all this really wonderful connection with each other, while also there's deep pain. And being able to hold the fact that we are emotionally complex beings and can hold conflicting feelings at the same time is really important. So, I'm sitting there holding my partner, and they're expressing, or I think they held me a lot more than I'm like totally in love with this person, and our like relationship is growing, and I'm also devastated. And my partner, I'm just going to refer to him, my partner had to be able to hold the sense of security, that sense of like, I know my partner that I'm in love with, that I'm sharing my life with, is crying over another person, is absolutely devastated over the loss of this other person. That doesn't diminish my importance. Doesn't diminish our relationship. It's not like, it's not like there's only one spot for love to be. You can simultaneously feel all of the feelings, and it's complicated. It requires some communication. I remember at one point, one of my partners, who was like being my like main support through the divorce, had actually asked me, he's like, listen, every time this is true, every time we start dating a new person, there's some tension around that. Even when you're hardcore happy poly, there's often an adjustment period. There are feelings that come up. My partner had asked me, he's like, look, he's like, I'm putting like all of my energy into helping support you right now. And could we not date new people? Of course, our existing partners, of course, we continue to date. You don't discard people just because like, something has changed. But he's like, could we not date new people while things are this hard? Because he's like, I'm putting all of my emotional capacity into supporting you, and I don't feel like I have the emotional bandwidth to also handle new person stuff, complexities. Everything's so complicated right now. And it's like, well, of course, he needed to express a limitation. He needed to express, this is how I can be 100% present for you while also not breaking myself. And I think that's, one of the many things I love about him and our partnership is our ability to have those kind of conversations where it's like, how do we both acknowledge each other? Like, my answers get so long, I know, but part of my job too was to recognize, like, I'm in a massive amount of pain. I'm really hurting. Like everything has changed. I have to continue looking out for my partners. I can't just stop caring about them. I can't just look for them to support me. I can't fall apart and stop showing them love and attention. I can't just make the whole situation be about me and my feelings. I have to still be emotionally responsible and present we can't just, even if our partners are like, yes, I'm 100% there for you, we still have to be able to step back and say, okay, for at least the next 20 minutes, I'm not going to talk about me. How are you?
Yeah.
You know, the support and the love still has to be a reciprocal, mutually supportive thing. Even we have to develop that sense of emotional resilience and capacity, even while we are fully present to being a complicated, mushy human being.
And I think that was a beautifully put explanation for anybody who is interested about what is a poly breakup. And I love it. And we can go on to the next question. Let's see, hold on.
Oh, actually, wait, I want to say one more thing about that.
Of course.
Sometimes another place where breakups happen is when incompatibility happens. So I'm going to give another example from my own life. I had a partner who was only had a certain amount of time available. We had children, we had a house together, we had a very intertwined life together. And when we were dating other people, what we did is we figured out, what do we need to maintain the life and the relationship and our like being good parents and all that kind of stuff together? What do we need in our relationship to like nurture this vital relationship? And then our other relationships, they did have is like, this is sacrosanct and we're going to take care of and nurture this partnership. When I met my life partner, he knew, like, I'm so sorry, I have to evict my cat. I will be right back.
No problem, I'll be right here.
Daddy, you are so loud. You're so loud. Okay. So, where was I? Help me. Sorry.
Oh goodness. This relationship was sacrosanct.
Oh, right. Thank you. So, when my partner started dating this really wonderful woman, he was able to say very clearly, here's what I'm available for. And what he said was, I'm available for, and I had said this to my partners too, it was like, I'm available, I think, because he had me and another partner and all this stuff. So he's like, I really can only date maybe once a month. That's really all I'm available for. And that's not a lot. And he's like, I understand if you don't want to date that. Like, a lot of people want more time. And she was like, no, once a month is awesome. That is all I need. Once a month sounds fantastic. And they dated that way and it was really beautiful and they fell in love with each other and that was just wonderful. But at some point she started to want more time. And she finally said, you know what, this isn't feeling good anymore. So she has every right to make whatever request she has of saying, like, this is where I'm at. I want more of your time. She said, for this to feel like a healthy, good relationship for me at this point in my life, I really want to see you 2 or 3 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't available for that. That wasn't where he wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so he had to say to her, so it's not his job to contort himself or break his other relationships or commitments or overwhelm himself or go beyond his own actual personal desire, because that's what she wanted. But he was able to lovingly say, like, I don't have that. Like, I can't give more time wise. He could be super emotionally present, but time wise, love is infinite, time is not. And so they parted ways on good terms. I think it was challenging, but in general, they were able to part. It was hard. I know it was emotionally very difficult for her because she had wanted something different. Sometimes we're not available for something different. If I had somebody come into my life right now and say, I'm madly in love with you, Magenta, I want to see, I want to be with you, this much time. If it was more than like max once a month, I don't care how amazing they are. I can't do it. If I date anybody more than that, probably even that at this point in my life, I will mess up everything else in my life.
Yeah.
So sometimes there are times where we enter into a dynamic and it fits, and then at some point it stops fitting. And one person wants more than the other person has a capacity to give. And it's very easy to be like, I need you to give more. You know, like, I'm in love with you, so show up more. If the other person isn't wholeheartedly, actively wanting that, then we have to decide, okay, I'd like to see them. Like with my partner who's married, I honestly would love to see him more. He's great. But I know what his availability is. If I were suddenly to say to him, you know, I need to see you twice a week, I would have to decide, like, okay, I might want to see him twice a week. He's not available for that. Do I either break up with him because we're no longer compatible, or do I decide, you know, maybe this isn't my first choice. Maybe I'd prefer to see him more, but I like what we have so much. You know what? I can live with this. I can be really happy with this, even though it's not maybe what I might have been my first choice.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's another way that things can, you know, and I think that's just about self-awareness and communication and trying to be present to our realities rather than
what we
just
hope.
Yeah.
I think that's all perfectly valid, fully 100%. And I think that's even very true when people try to enter monogamous relationships, seeing what are they capable? Are they capable of doing, being able to live with somebody else? Are they capable of giving that type of commitment? Do they need that? And being honest and truthful with your own wants and needs, and also what you can give back while still loving this person deeply. Like, I have a friend who's like, I love this person, my whole heart. I cannot live with another human being. That doesn't diminish the love I have for them. I just know that I cannot physically live with this other human being. And that's not a derogative against this other being. Just I'm incapable of doing that. And they're still together, perfectly happy. That's just what he can give. And it doesn't lessen the fact that they're together, madly in love. He just knows, I don't want to live with another person. And that is perfectly valid as well.
Because they're able to communicate and respect each other's boundaries, they're able to have a healthy, long-term, sustainable relationship rather than like contorting themselves out of shape, moving in together, and then learning to hate each other.
Yeah, because that they living together made have that person hate that other person. And they just very self-aware, like, I cannot live with another human being, no matter how much I love them. And I think that is something that a lot of people need to work towards. And I think that is something beautiful in this discussion we've had. Let's go to Rosemary asks, how do you know when it's working and how do you know when it's not?
So, to be overly simplistic, how do you feel? And a lot of that is, how do you feel over time? So that's kind of, everything's complicated. I don't have short answers, honestly, but so when things are working really beautifully, you know it's working because it feels good and you're enjoying it. And yes, it's complicated. And sometimes, you know, dark chocolate is the best chocolate, right? You know, bittersweet. It's okay if everything's not milk chocolate and easy. It's okay if things can have a little extra flavor, a little bit of extra challenge in it. That doesn't mean it's bad, but you generally like what's happening. It's worth it. Even if it's like, okay, this part is hard, but these parts are wonderful. I think for people that are trying to make transitions, trying to decide like, okay, is poly working for me? One of the things, and there's kind of a longer process that I won't like go into right now, but like, I often recommend that people take a chunk of time and they keep track of their emotions. And I ask them to write down their emotions. And there's a little process, but so that they can see over time what the trajectory of their feelings are. So like, let's say we start trying polyamory and it is just hard. It's not fun. It is just work. And we don't know if it's ever going to be fun or if it's ever going to be worth it. We set an intention that, okay, I'm going to give it this much time, X amount of time. And I'm going to keep track of my feelings. I'm going to keep track of the challenges that I'm going through. And we're going to do the work. We're going to really focus on how can we build this into something that is functional? How can we build this into something that feels healthy and sustainable? And we see over a period of time, is there an upward trajectory? Is there an improving trajectory? Even if it's like, ouch, we see, because and by keeping track, I think it can be really useful because with really writing things down, because our brains are dumb. Our brains are very, so when things suck, we're like, it has never been good before. I was lying to myself when I thought it was okay. It is all hell. And then when things are good, we're like, oh my gosh, the other day when I was crying, it was nothing. It was no big deal. We're not great at keeping a consistent narrative. To write things down and keep track of that was really hard, but it was less hard. Actually, and then I went on a date and it felt really nice, actually. And that part, and we keep track a little bit, and I like getting a little methodical about things. I like being a little, I kind of like charts. I like information and data data gathering, to kind of get a general temperature over time to see where we're heading. Because what we don't want to do is end up in a miserable holding pattern for 10 years, hoping for 10 years of miserable, that maybe something will change eventually. Because that's 10 years of your life.
Yeah.
And if you're going and things are not changing, and either you sit down with your partner and you say, okay, we have to make things change. What we're doing isn't working, so let's try another tactic. Or we let it go because it's not getting better. But we also don't go, oh my gosh, it's hard. This is really challenging. I'm crying a lot. It feels bad, so I'm going to bail on it. Because for most people going through the transition from monogamy to poly, it is extraordinarily difficult. It's really painful. It's phases of, some people go through deep existential panic, pain, right? All the feelings. It's fundamental existential panic at that process. And if you just go, that was really hard, and then you stop, maybe that's the right move. If poly is not right for you, you are not obligated to face that crucible. You are not obligated to sit in that fire. But if you have an inclination, you want to see if you can get past it, you don't panic the first time it hurts or the 7th time it hurts. You go, okay, this is going to be rough. And the way I like to put it out there is it's knowing that there's a storm front coming in. You know that there are going to be moments of pain and grief and challenge. Then when it comes in, you cannot panic. You can let the storm happen. You go, oh, okay, I know what's happening here. I know that this storm is going to pass and I will survive it. And then I'll see how I feel tomorrow. I'm not going to make any decisions right now in the middle of the storm. I'm not going to decide to move because there's a storm coming through. In the morning, I will survey the devastation and see if I want to stick around in this town or not. We let the storm go through without panicking. So we have to find that balance between staying too long past the point of nothing's changing, or being with a partner who's oh yeah, we'll fix things, but we never do fix things, so it just keeps being miserable forever. We don't want that. We don't want to bail as soon as it's challenging. So that's a very delicate and personal kind of thing. There's no single answer, but I think often kind of mutually deciding on a reasonable amount of time to see if there's improvement. It doesn't have to be perfect at the end of that time, but have we made things better? And I think that's the truth, whether it's poly or whether it's the relationship facing a challenge. One of the things, this is a bit of a tangent, but sometimes having to go through really challenging changes is an act of love. So there's this phrase, poly bombing, which is when somebody suddenly announces to their monogamous partner, surprise, I want to be poly. And it's like their whole life explodes. I'm actually working on a series right now. I've been writing this script right now about polybombing. Actually, relationship bombs can be an act of love. They don't feel good. They are not fun. But sometimes our partners come to us, and whether it's poly or something entirely different, they come to us and they're like, hey, we've been on this train track going in a direction. And I'm now realizing, for whatever reason, that this train, if we stay on this track going in the direction we're going, we are gonna go right straight into a cliff. If we keep doing what we're doing, we will end.
Mm-hmm.
Something needs to change. And so sometimes the person just is like, okay, I'm done, I'm off. But sometimes that process of trying something new, trying something challenging, is like pulling the lever on that train, taking a turn, and maybe the train turns and you land in the ocean. Maybe it's just a whole new disaster that you expected, another inevitable doom. But at least it's an opportunity. And so that's, and that's when our partners come to us and they're like, I have to have kids, or I don't want to have kids, or I want to move somewhere, or I'm trans, or I'm queer, or I'm something, or I'm poly, or I'm monogamous. Something about the way that we have agreed our relationship was going to go is no longer working. Mm-hmm. Something fundamental has changed. And we might want to tell our partner, like, no, I don't want to hit that cliff, and I don't want to pull the lever. I want to keep going and not hit the cliff. And your partner's like, the reality is that's not an option. The reality is something has changed. The partner's like, I have to be poly, I have to be mono, I have to whatever, all these different things that can change. Giving it a try, sometimes absolutely. If you're like, no, I will never like poly, so just to stick with a poly thing, I will never like it. I'm monogamous to my core. Everything about the idea of polyamory just disgusts me. I don't want anything to do with it. That is a completely reasonable, noble, valid place to be. You absolutely get to get the hell off that train. Mm-hmm. 100%. No matter how much your partner wishes you would just give it a try, and you'd like it if you tried it, and if you love me, you'd like, just try. No, you don't. You're not obligated to try. But if you feel like maybe there could be something in it for you, and when I say in it for you, the goal is to thrive, not to tolerate.
Yeah.
The goal is never to like, okay, let's see if you can fight through and cry through this miserable poly bullshit. The goal is to like get to a place where it is selfishly good for you too.
Yeah.
If there's an idea that it could work, then sometimes that process of pulling the lever and seeing what's down that route, that is love. It's saying, I love this relationship and it's important to me, and I want to see, like, what we're doing isn't working, but I want to see if we could build something new and different that does work. And I'm tangenting here, but I've talked about my divorce a bunch, and I want to put this out there. Having, for people that have been polybombed, or people who are about to polybomb their partners, where they've realized like monogamy doesn't work for me, like I need to change things, whatever it is. There's a lot of guilt that comes with dropping the bomb. Mm-hmm. If you know that the track you're on is inevitable doom, pulling that lever is saying, and I'm repeating myself right now, but is saying we're important, and we are more important. The train is more important than the tracks. And it may involve tears, and it might be really freaking hard, because for people who are happily monogamous trying to transition to poly, it's like they don't want to. They liked what they have, and now they're being asked to find some way of liking something totally different. But the thing is, yeah, there are going to be tears. Yes, there will be grief. Things are changing. Even when people are like both fully excited about transitioning to polyamory, it still involves grief. Mm-hmm. They're changing. Change is hard. But in that process, with my divorce, it was a surprise. My partner was unable to drop the bomb. They didn't tell me in time for us to try to pull a lever and see what else could be done. By the time I knew something was wrong, it was over. And I got all the tears and the heartbreak and the pain, and no opportunity to fix it. when people drop that bomb and it just feels like they've betrayed you because they've just changed everything and they've hurt you, actually, they're giving you a chance, the two of you, to try something different. And the tears and the pain are going to happen either way, because what you're doing isn't working. Even if you wish it was, it is no longer working. So accepting that reality, saying, okay, the truth is that's not an option. It was my first choice, but the choice doesn't exist. Let's see if we can do something revolutionary, weird, crazy, bizarre, unexpected. And maybe through that difficulty and challenge, we might find something incredibly beautiful. And maybe we'll go straight into the ocean. But the pain part is going to happen either way. If you get an opportunity to sit with somebody you love and try to create something new and functional together, to me, it's a gift, even if it's painful.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, how do you know if it's working or not? You give it a try, and then you see how you feel about it. And you let yourself let go if it's time to let go.
And I think that is so true. I think that is something that a lot of us can learn from just in general, especially even if somebody is trying monogamy, polyamory or monogamy. And that was a beautiful explanation to it. Polybomb to keep from going off a cliff. And so here is from Jamie Baker. What would you say is the trickiest part of navigating this type of relationship? And I think we may have touched it earlier.
The trickiest part of navigating, it so depends on the individuals. It's so funny. There are just so many different directions that the challenges can come from. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of it is self-awareness. I think a lot of it is being able to sit with discomfort, with our own discomfort, with our partner's discomfort, figuring out how to communicate through challenges, developing the emotional intelligence and the communication skills that allow us to like talk about hard things without shutting down, without either dismissing the other person or dismissing our own needs. That's hard. And frankly, that's monogamous, poly, single. This is just something that, like, I think as a society, we are not necessarily often taught. In fact, I think a lot of us come from family cultural backgrounds that teach us the exact opposite.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the challenge of becoming a good communicator. I think that's the hardest part.
And
I could go on for like an hour, but
oh no, you're fine. No, and we did touch on that, and I think that is one of the biggest things, especially just in relationships in general now, is people learning how to communicate, just period, their own wants and needs, and what they're capable of. Just, I see that's especially down here. I see it's a very people learning how to communicate better, but still coming from cultures where we don't talk about our feelings and we don't talk about our wants really. We just do what needs to be done, or kind of just trudge through it until something breaks. And that's not necessarily healthy anyway. Let me see, what is this one? Oh, well, Brianna asked a question that's more partially about you. What gives you the qualification to give this advice? And what successes have you had in relationships? I've seen a lot of coaches have little no experience in this area.
So I'm going to be really honest. What qualifications do I have? Like I said before at the beginning of the talk, I decided I wanted to be a coach, and so I became a coach. Which I know, I'm fully aware, it's an incredibly heuristic thing to do.
Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I think there's the life experience of having been through this and learned and grown from those experiences.
I've been poly for a long time. I actually think that the fact that I was functionally monogamous and went through the transition to polyamory, I think I would not be a good coach without that. Mm-hmm. I am really grateful that I have such a warm, loving view of monogamy, it was gorgeous. It was healthy and like healing and fun and nurturing. It was everything I could have wanted it to be. I'm so glad that I had that, because I don't come at this from a place of bias, of like elitism. And I also had to go through the process, even though I was like super poly. The transition was freaking hard. I couldn't believe how hard it was. I feel like we went through all of the stuff that people go through. And I'm really grateful for the experience that I've had. I've also spent a lot of time, like my entire adult life, talking to hundreds, thousands, I don't know, everybody I could get to talk to me, to tell me about what was going on in their lives. I'm obsessive. I like, tell me about your life. So I tried to learn from everyone I've talked to, every situation I've been in. I learned from my clients. I think honestly, I'm a far better coach now than I was when I started. And the divorce, as shitty as it was, also made me a much better coach than I was before that. Like when I started, it was terrifying. I really wasn't sure if I was a fraud. I thought that I had useful tools, and that's the people that were encouraging me to do this. They were like, listen, give it a try. And if people keep hiring you, then you're being useful. And that was how I decided to that was the litmus test that I made for myself. I'm going to try to do the job. I'm going to see if the skill sets that I have are actually useful to people. And if they are useful to people, if people feel like I'm doing something good, then I'm going to keep doing it. And that's what happened. I don't think I'm for everybody. I also, and I do want to say, like, coaching is fuzzy. Coaching is like, it's the Wild West, right? Like anybody can declare them a coach. There are absolutely nut jobs out there. Just because somebody says that they're good at something doesn't mean they are. When I talk to somebody, I want them to be talking to me critically. I want them to be seeing, is this particular person going to be helpful to me in my particular situation? And I also think that, I'm not a therapist. So there's a difference. Sometimes, like, I make it very clear to people, I'm not a therapist. Therapy is vital and important, and everyone should do therapy. And that is not what I do. I don't replace therapy by any stretch of the imagination. I bring tools that have been useful to other people. And if those tools can be useful to you, then there's utility in what I offer. But it is fuzzy, and I totally understand. I know there are a lot of people who are like, wow, coaches, that's crazy. I don't blame them. But I've been on the fence about going ahead and getting my therapist license, because I know I've spoken to people who are like, oh, I feel like maybe you should be a therapist instead of a coach. I know that at the beginning of this process for me, one of the reasons I went into coaching rather than pursuing getting a therapy license was that I really just wanted to work in my niche. I wanted to work with people facing these particular challenges. I knew that, and I thought about going to, there were several coaching programs I thought about going to, but they're all monogamy based.
Yeah.
And that's a different skill set. I knew that my information was specialized enough that I felt like it was more important to do this work than to pursue other directions. Yeah, that's basically, I decided that I would be a good coach, and then it seems that I have been a good coach. So
I think the proof is in the pudding, honestly. And I think a lot of people who have been coaches, because it comes from real life experience, and people who can take, like I was telling other people where they ask like, when I give advice on life. I'm like, well, I read a lot about philosophy. I've been to my own therapy sessions. I've experienced a lot of things in my past, but I also not only my own things. I've watched what's happened to my mother, who's 71. I've watched what happened to my friends, and I've learned from others' mistakes. Have I made some of the same mistakes? Absolutely. Even though I saw the sign, I had seen somebody else had the sign, I still walked right into the pool. However, I have learned those things. And like I told, whenever because I'm not coaching, but I'm helping people. Like I told them too, I'm like, I'm not here to fix whatever mental health thing you're going through, but I'm here to give you a coping skill that'll make it a little bit easier and keep you here with us. And when you are able to go see therapy or able to do the work yourself, I kept you here long enough to be able to do all of that. I cannot substitute for therapy. I can give you these coping skills, these moments where you are just beating yourself up and you're letting the voices win, and I'm here to tell you it's okay. You are still valid. You are still loved. Remember that. Mm-hmm. And so I think I agree with you.
I think we have things to learn from each other. Mm-hmm. And I also think that, I've been trying to work on increasing my online content production. I am not great at that, but I've been working really hard on it. Part of it, I had to fight some definite imposter syndrome stuff and where do I get off thinking that my philosophy is, and the thing is, there are a lot of people saying a lot of things. And one thing I feel very certain of, very much actually our messages are not different. There is space in this world for more positive voices. There is room and a need for people that have developed systems that have allowed them to thrive in a very complicated world. If you have something beautiful to share it. Mm-hmm. There's always going to be people out there, especially now in today's world, where anybody with a voice can just say all their stuff. So if you have something that feels meaningful, that you had to learn to get this knowledge, maybe you had to suffer to get this knowledge, you had to grow to get this knowledge, sharing it, not everyone's going to resonate with it. It's not going to be useful to everyone, but maybe it will be useful to somebody. Maybe those words of support or kindness or love, those tools that we have for thriving and surviving difficult things, maybe that tool will resonate with somebody and it will help them get through something challenging. And then what you have done is valuable. It doesn't have to be for everybody. It just needs to be for the people that it works for.
Exactly. 100%. Let's see if we have a couple more questions. How do you balance out couple privilege when an established couple decides to open their relationship? As a panromantic poly woman, I've found myself as the unicorn in this situation more than once, and it's often been a disaster. And this is from Heather. The couple tends to vote on things, and it's always their two against my one. Or the couple will make rules, which is a huge red flag. What advice would you give established couples new to polyamory and the people who may date them to mitigate the risks of the situation turning toxic?
So for couples that are opening up, one of the things that they really need to do before they start dating people is they need to spend a bunch of time reading and listening to podcasts and reading things about why unicorn hunting. There's a wonderful essay, and oh my goodness, there's this amazing essay. It's kind of a classic on unicorn hunting. And what I'm saying is useless because I don't remember the title. But you want to do your learning, you want to do your prep work, you want to sit together and talk about these things so that and the best thing to do is there's so many resources online. You can find countless poly people talking about why couples privilege and unicorn hunting are dangerous, why it goes badly. Those resources are out there. look for people who have been wounded by unicorn hunty situations. Read about it, talk about it with your partner, figure out how to compensate for those things, how to avoid those pitfalls before you start dating. So that you got it in your head before this person comes in. This is a whole damn person. This is not a plaything. This is not a toy. We do not get to make demands on this person about what they're allowed to do or who they're allowed. We're going to come at this like informed adults doing the best we can, and we're going to go slow, and we're going to be respectful, and we're going to listen. It is good for the couple, for them individually to know what they're available for, to be able to communicate. And part of that also is if you are going in, my advice, and this is really simplistic, and I know a lot of people hearing this will be quite upset by this actually. If you're trying to go to be poly to find your sister wife, and you're going to find your person to like marry and bring into your, stop, just don't do that. Date separately. You can date together, but as individuals, goodness. Date as individuals. I think I was trying to say individually and
and then Eve.
Yeah. Try to go in with your eyes open and listen and take stock and be patient. Read. When you're dating a new person, understand that, big red flag. And actually, from the unicorn, from the person dating in, look for the red flags. Things to look for. If the partners have veto power, just run the other way. People talk about veto. Sometimes couples will talk about veto power. It's like, no, it's not veto power. It's just that we want to be in agreement. Or it's not veto power. It's just if something really bad happens, then like we'll always choose each other first, but don't worry, that won't happen to you. Veto power is, if one person decides they don't like the situation, you are out the door. That shouldn't be the situation. You don't have to, nobody wants to be in that situation where they are discardable. If you are a couple and you really are just looking for somebody to have sex with, that's fine. The swinger scene, totally great. Be honest about it. And you're like, we are a committed couple. We're super pair bonded, but every once in a while, we really want to have sex with an awesome woman.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know I'm like so heteronormative in this conversation. Great. Be honest about it. Be clear about it. Sometimes couples will do this awful thing, especially on dating apps. We have a couple and the woman will go out and she'll it's almost like, what are those fish that have the little...
The anglerfish.
Almost like she's like a little angler fish. And it's like, okay, the woman goes out there and finds some poor girl to date. And then she's like, oh, by the way, I'd like you to meet my husband. Don't do that. Be honest, be clear, be upfront about what you're looking for. If you are a new poly couple, be honest about that too. In fact, it can be a really lovely, vulnerable thing to say, hey, and some long-term poly folks will be like, I don't want to touch that with a 10-foot stick. Come back when you figured out what you're doing. But sometimes being able to say, we're new at this, and being humble about it, like we're new at this, we're trying to figure it out. We're going really slowly. That can be a good place to be. Mm-hmm. If you are the person thinking about dating a couple, if the couple is dating as a unit, I see that as at least an orange flag. We're heading into red flag territory because of the potential for coercion and obligation. Mm-hmm. Listen to what happens when you talk about your desires. Now, that doesn't mean that you get to have what you want. So again, like you are talking to a seriously pair bonded couple and they're like, we'd like to be in a relationship, we'd like to date, we'd like to have fun, but like also we have a home and like we're still going to continue to be this kind of unit. They get to say that. They get to have that. Being poly, sometimes when we get into conversations around non-hierarchical poly, people can get pretty extremist about having zero hierarchy, and it's like, no, everybody has to be on the same level. No, if you're a partnership and you've been together for a long time and this is a form of a relationship you really want to have, but you also want to be able to have other kinds of relationships, and you've communicated that clearly, maybe as the person who's coming in, you're like, what I'm really looking for is a couple to date polyfidelously, and I want to move in, and I want us to have a 3-person family. If the other people involved are not game for that, they don't have to agree. And then you get to decide, like, do I want to be with this or not? But listen to how they respond. Are your feelings heard? Do your opinions matter? It doesn't always mean we get what we want, but we need to know that we're respected. The other thing to look out for, where couples privilege becomes really toxic, why hierarchy has a bad name, is because the rule, to me, it's simple. Treat the people you're dating like you like them.
Yeah.
Treat them like they're your friend. If I have a friend and I have like a date on Tuesday to go watch a movie with my buddy, and I just cancel on them at the last minute because, like, my girlfriend wants me to stay home, I'm not going to have a friend for very long. Pretty soon, they're going to stop showing up to movies with me because I'm like, and I clearly don't respect their time, right? When you make a date with somebody, you show up. You respect the time. If you are going out with somebody who's part of a couple and their partner is calling and texting the whole time, and you're not able to actually have any time together, if dates keep getting canceled, things keep coming up, you're being treated like your time doesn't matter as much as somebody else, fail. You want to be treated, expect your partners to treat you like people that love you, that like really care about you. And even if it's not a love partnership, even if it's just fun, sexy time, we still treat each other with love. We still treat each other with care and respect. And if you're not being treated that way, don't put yourself through it. There are times, like, to me, in many ways, it's so simple how to just treat people with respect. If you make a date with somebody, you show up for it, unless something really drastic is that. Now, like, for example, at one point I had a date with my husband at the time. We had 2 small children. We had set up a babysitter. It was a really big deal. We had a big date, and it was a very exciting date that we were super excited about. And my other partner got mugged and shot. He was fine. He got shot 5 times and was fine. I mean, there was healing to do.
Yeah.
So by the hierarchy rules, my husband is here and my partner's here. And clearly by like the unfair couples privilege, screwed up version of couples privilege, who gets my time? This person. Well, I called up my husband and I was like, partner got mugged and is in the hospital. And my husband was like, holy crap, I'm going to come home from work. I'll watch the kids. You go to the hospital and I'll see you when you get back. It's not about hierarchy. It's about taking care of each other. It's about, like, yeah, of course, yes, we've got this coupley long history, all this kind of stuff, but of course you're going to go take care of this other person in your life because they need you. Now, if every time I was supposed to go on a date with my husband, I canceled every time because, oh, my boyfriend stubbed their toe, my girlfriend has a headache, my other friend wants to go to a party, and I like keep canceling on this partner, they're gonna leave because I'm not treating them with care and respect. If we just behave like adults, it gets a lot simpler. And if we expect people to treat us with respect, that's, I think, the biggest thing for people getting into any relationship, whether it's mono or poly, couples, singles, it doesn't matter. The relationship should feel good to be in. You should feel like this thing is bringing something to your life. That whole narrative I mentioned at the beginning, I was raised to feel like love is hard and painful. And like you're only deserving of love if you're willing to suffer for it. Screw that. why be in that relationship? If being in the relationship feels crappy, just be single. And if being single feels so much worse, like you're like, I need to be in a relationship just so I won't be single, be single and figure out what's going on with that. Learn to be okay with yourself, because it is only be in relationships that bring something positive to your world. And if the relationship feels shitty, listen to that. Treat yourself with respect. Just like you expect, like you treat them with respect.
Yeah. I think that was a beautiful answer. A beautiful, fantastic answer. So we have, okay, hold on. Auntie Kinky asks, what are the biggest issues that commonly come up in larger polycules, BS smaller polycules? What's BS mean?
I bet they verses, maybe. Did they mean VS?
Verses, yeah.
Logistics. That's I have to say, Google Calendar, it's like that is like poly gold standard. It really so part of it is logistics. Part of it is sometimes it can turn into, especially if it's like a big poly group living in the same house, then it turns into like roommate stuff. And honestly, looking at how do co-op housing situations work, rather than like when you have a monogamous, or when you have a couple, just two people, we can often get away with like division of labor. So now I'm talking about like everybody lives together. We can often get away with a division of labor that is a little vague, because, you know, two people can kind of make everything work. Once you get a bunch of people, make up some chore charts, figure out how to make sure that everybody is getting time, and that everybody in a dynamic should be looking out for each other and for themselves. So I'm just like reflecting on my own situations a whole bunch. I had a polycule that was 6 people, where not all of us were dating each other, but it was kind of a closed, we weren't closed, but it was a functionally closed polycule where I was dating these 2 people and they were dating those 2 people, and, you know, it was big, complicated little map. And all of us were looking out for each other. So there would be conversations where, you know, one partner would be like, hey, have you gotten to see my nesting partner, the partner that I lived with, was like, we were kind of keeping an eye out for each other. Like, oh, have you gotten a chance to see so-and-so?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you know, I know we are supposed to have a date on Tuesday, but I know that partner X just got back from their trip. Why don't you guys take Tuesday? And we'll catch up on another night, because like, I know it's been a while since you've seen each other. So we're looking out for each other. Ideally, everyone involved cares about everybody else involved. And we understand that all partnerships require time, effort, and attention. One of the things that can happen in long-term relationships, and this is a mono and a poly thing, people take each other for granted. Culturally, I think there's this underlying element that comes through a lot of relationships where we kind of assume it's puppy love unless we take each other for granted. There's an assumption. Once you've been together for a long time, you take each other for granted. People get really excited about new relationship energy. It's the little fuzz you get when you meet a new person. Sometimes in larger established groups, poly groups, it's like, well, we're no longer in NRE, and now there's a new exciting person, so we're just going to put a whole bunch of attention over here and kind of just expect our other partners to like wait or be backburnered. Don't do that. Each partnership that you're in needs to continue to be treated like a vital, important thing that needs to be nurtured and cared for as an active, growing thing. Poly doesn't allow us to get lazy with our partnerships. It also requires us to be really smart and self-aware. So if we know that we can't get into a new relationship without screwing over our other relationships, don't get into a new relationship.
Yeah.
If you have a tendency to be like hyper focused on one partner, and then when you find a new partner, you're hyper focused on them, probably don't be poly. Maybe don't or be really clear that you're solo poly and you're not going to do like, let people know you're more of an episodic partner. You're not like, be clear about what you have to offer.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so, you know, the more people you have involved, you have a cat.
I am cat sitting with nephew, and I brought my cat with me, who's my 11-year-old. And so we're trying road tripping together. And my friends took their first trip since pandemic, and they've had him throughout pandemic, so he's not used to being without mommy and daddy. And so I have my 11-year-old girl who's currently right here. And so he's still like, is this okay? Is she okay? And she's like, I'm gonna go over here. Because she's an old lady. He's like 3. And so we're still, my girl's this beautiful little gray old lady.
Aww.
And so I'm trying to road trip her more, because I'm like, she's 11, she's an old gal, and I like road tripping. So instead of having to leave her at home and friends watch her, why don't I just bring her along on these domestic road trips and see how she does? And we did one from San Antonio to Houston for the first time in 7 years. It did require me having to stop to let her lay on me for about 10-20 minutes and then put her back in the carrier, and then she's like, okay, I'm good now.
Oh, that's adorable. That is really cute.
Yeah, I love her. Best cat. She's been with me for her entire 11 years of life.
Oh.
So, yeah.
We have cats and rabbits. I kind of love my critters.
I love them too. I'm sorry, distraction.
Yeah, me too. I totally got lost.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. Oh, we were talking about don't, if you feel more episodic poly person, be upfront about that and be upfront with what you can and can't.
And just know the more people that are involved, the more complicated it gets,
Mm-hmm.
because there are more moving parts. There are also, I think, the more, you know, just one thing, a funny story from my big polycule, that there's also so we were all fluid bonded because it was kind of it was open if somebody met somebody, but for a big chunk of time, it was just the 6 of us. So we were all fluid bonded, and somebody got a bacterial infection. And this was super fun. And we have to know, and the reason I'm bringing up infections, STIs, that kind of thing, is I wanted, people need to be careful. They need to be safe. They need to be smart, but we also need to understand that, like, I want to destigmatize.
Shit happens.
Yeah, like, you know, even before COVID, I used to say, like, a friend of mine, this happened to a friend of mine, went to the grocery store, somehow got fucking spinal meningitis and died 2 days later. Fucking horrific, pardon my language.
Yeah.
We continue to go out, and we continue to go out, we continue to do things. You know, I worked an event where everybody got together and everyone at the event got norovirus. Like, people were out both ends, everyone, for like days. It was horrific. There was no sense of like shame, oh, you're all dirty, bad people, you got what you deserved, you know, anything like that. It was just, we know that we can get sick, but because we come from a puritanical society and a sex shaming society, if it's an STI, we act like it's some big thing, you know. And I'm not minimizing it. Some of these things are serious, and we do need to take them serious. We do need to be testing regularly. We have to be responsible. We have to be communicative. But I do think we need to stop treating getting sick like it's some judgment from God sin thing.
There's no morality to an STI. You could have slept with 20 people and not caught anything, but slept with one person and still caught something.
Exactly.
STIs don't care. They're just an infection.
Like, be smart, be clever, but like, know that. And I, because people sometimes get really freaked out when they're transitioning to polyamory. They're like, oh my God, I'm going to be at risk. And it's like, well, you kind of always are.
Yeah.
And you take that risk and be smart with it. But yeah, with my polycule, I was the only one who responded. My body is very delicate. No one else, none of the other women in the group were affected by the bacterial infection, but I kept getting it. And finally I'm like, I was like, what the hell? Aha, it's bouncing through the group. So I had taken meds and I got rid of it. And then I got it again. And then I got it again. And I'm like, what? Oh, we're all carriers. But it's only me. And what was lovely about the group, there was never any conversation about fault or blame. It wasn't who brought it. Because even if we could have figured out where it came from, those things can just happen.
Yeah.
Your flora gets out of whack, stuff happens. There's no need for shame or guilt or anything like that. And what was really lovely about my group, it just like made my heart just feel so full. It was so hard. I wasn't ready to have that conversation, but I had to contact all 6 people or all 5 of the other people and be like, so had a thing. And what was really beautiful is everybody in the group just automatically, they all went to the doctors. They all got on the meds, even though none of them but me was having any negative effects. They all got on the meds and nobody had any kind of fluid transfer sex for like, I don't know, I think it was like 2 weeks or something like that. So that we just all, and it was frustrating for all of us, and because all of us like sex a whole lot. And it was just like, we're going to do other things for a couple of weeks. And it was just the whole kind of, I don't know, the whole team got together and we kicked its butt. We did our meds and then we went back to having fun sex. Having that kind of just adult perspective around this kind of stuff, the more people that are involved, the more stuff can happen. So you want to be careful, you want to be wise, you want to be communicative, and you want to not freak out. So yeah,
I think logistics.
Google Calendar, STI management.
We'll do the little chart. Okay, I gotta call this person, you call that person, and let's make sure. And so I think Auntie Kinky has another question. What are some easy to identify differences between open relationships, poly relationships, and cheating? And I think those are pretty self-evident if you would like to go into them.
So cheating, definitely. Cheating is, if you're lying about it, you're cheating. Don't do that. Cheating and poly are not the same thing. Ethical non-monogamy, ethical non-monogamy is, that's the umbrella term. So, polyamory, all polyamory is ethically non-monogamous. Not all E&M is poly.
Yeah.
So, hall passes and threesomes and, whatever. There's lots of different versions of ethical non-monogamy. Ethics being the core point. Cheating, you're lying. And one of the problems with cheating, one of the many problems with it, is that you are denying the other person the right to informed consent. We each get to decide if we want to opt into a dynamic. And when we lie to somebody, we have taken the right away from them to decide if they want to be a part of a situation or not. To me, cheating is heading into assault land because talking about STIs, yes, we need to diminish the fear mongering around STIs, but there are risks and we get to choose what our risk tolerance is. And if we are uninformed about what is potentially coming into us, literally, we may be putting ourselves into danger that we didn't opt into. So in short, cheating bad. If to folks, if you have cheated, if people are hearing this, that doesn't mean you're beyond redemption, which is a kind of weird term to use, but if you have fucked up, because people screw up and they realize, oh my gosh, I really messed up. What was the phrase that I heard a little while? It was something, I'm gonna bastardize it, but it was basically the phrase was the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The next best time is right now. So if you messed up, if you blew it, you did something, fix it. That's all, just fix it. Anyway, on to ethical non-monogamy and poly. Polyamory leaves the door open it has the potential for emotional, loving connection. It doesn't mean that every relationship person that you connect with is going to turn into a potential, life mate. But the different, like, I remember talking to somebody at one point, they had just had a big breakup and they were super excited about, they're like, polyamory is amazing. I was quite surprised because they always seemed very mono to me. Like, polyamory is amazing. I'm having so much fun. I'm dating so many people. And he's like, at some point, it's so honest and open. At some point, like I'll want to get into a real relationship again. But like right now, I really like being poly. My head exploded. I'm like, you're not poly. You're just dating.
Yeah.
Okay, you're non-monogamous. You can be, and it like you can be ethically non-monogamous. You can have threesomes and moresomes and orgies and have all the sex and the fun that you want. You can date as much as you want, as long as everyone understands what the story is, understands what you're offering. Polyamory, when somebody specifically says, I'm polyamorous, what that says to me is that there is the potential for deep loving connection. It may or may not turn into that. There's no obligation to have it turn into that, but there's the possibility of it turning. And also what that means depends on the person. Like for me, again, I only date. I don't do really casual dating. I feel better with long-term. If I date somebody, it's with the intention of it becoming, like, my hope is that it will become a long-term loving connection. For me, falling madly in love with somebody may still only mean seeing them a couple times a year, maybe.
Yeah.
What that looks like can look all sorts of different ways. But polyamory indicates emotional availability. And then you still have to like discuss what the nuances are about that. Like with monogamy, often there's just assumptions. If you're monogamous, people think that means there's like a clear idea of what that means. In reality, they should talk about the details between each other. Assumptions are bad. But some people are, when they're in the ethical non-monogamy, not poly thing, they're really looking to have sexual partners, friends with benefits, no strings attached connections, flings, maybe dear beloved friends that occasionally you fuck. I think that's the fuck buddy thing. Which is fine. There's like it, as long as everyone is kind of aware of, like you don't, and then it's also your responsibility if somebody's like, hey, I'm only available for a fling. If somebody tells me I'm only available for a fling, I'm like, no matter how hot you are, I'm not going to have fun with that. That's going to feel bad to me. So so that's it's kind of what you're available for and kind of what you are inclined towards.
I think that is beautiful, honestly. What? Sorry, I got distracted. He started meowing. Let's see. I think we have we've answered this question actually. So let's move on to Auntie Kinky's last question is, what are effective tools for dealing with jealousy in any form when it arises?
Sitting through the storm, letting it be there, knowing that jealousy does come up. I hear people often say, I couldn't be poly because I get too jealous. Poly people get jealous. We're human. Poly people have all the normal feelings. Part of it, and there are some techniques, a lot of things around mindfulness. Therapy is really good for sitting and talking, figuring out where the panic is coming from. Sometimes there are things that you can talk to your partner about, what kind of support you might want to ask for or look for with partnerships. Before and after care can be really important. If there are dates happening, there are lots of things one can do within the partnership to ameliorate the panic mode or the jealousy, whatever. That can be really useful. A lot of it also, and I think that's a really important thing though, is that it is both like we talked about earlier, it's not somebody else's job to fix your feelings. It should both be, if you're in a partnership, a mutual effort towards building a safe, warm, supportive environment. And we also want to learn to be present to our own feelings, to let the feelings come and release them. to sit with them and see that they're not going to kill us. A lot of times in the earlier days, we're not going to feel safe until we've been safe. And, actually, I'm going to say something really quickly about jealousy, which is, of course, we have panic. Everything that we have been raised by, like every movie, television show, every song, all of our cultural mythology, all of our folk, I used to be a folk singer, all of our folk music, everything is based around monogamy. It runs deep. It's not just like the best choice, it is the only legitimate choice. Everything we have been taught is that if someone else wants our partner, they are the enemy. If our partner even like looks at someone else, they clearly don't love us. And we're about to be abandoned and everything will be terrible. We have an enormous amount of cultural weight around monogamy. And add on to that, the way we evolved, because, we're a communal animal, we evolved to know that if something threatened our home, if something threatened our access to home, we would literally die. Not like we'd be sad for a little while. We would die. We would starve to death. We would freeze to death. Polyamory, jealousy, when we're afraid our partner starts dating somebody else, what that often sets off is this: our animal brain sees something is threatening home. That's what when we're in love with somebody, that person often becomes a representative of home, capital H, home. That is our cave mate. That is our partner against the terrifying darkness outside of the cave. When it feels like something might be threatening home, we can have this animal existential panic response. And it can be brutal. It can be really intense. And what we want to do is recognize it. We want to love ourselves for it. That's that part inside of us trying to protect ourselves. It's trying maybe to protect them. It's trying to protect home. And it doesn't understand. It is not a reasoning thing inside of us. So if our first instinct is panic, that's okay. But what we have to do is take a breath to recognize, okay, I might panic. I might have a really intense panic response. For guys often, and again, being heteronormative here, a lot of guys have this like ownership protectiveness around their female partners. And that is a trained also behavior of like, must protect woman. And if somebody else is like, must, it's a terrible.
I love it.
So I've talked to men who they're like philosophically on board, but when they think about their girlfriends being with another guy, they have this like rage that comes up. Know that it's coming. If that's part of your system, be aware that it exists. Know that it's there, like that storm front that's going to come through and it will pass. Don't respond to it. Don't go beat anything up. Don't go wound yourself or anybody else. Know that that storm is going to come through. Love yourself for it. Let your intellect step in and guide your emotions. Let your intellect come in and take care of you while your emotions are on fire. We want to be a balanced being between our heart and our mind. We are all of a piece. Sometimes we need our intellects to kick in. Mindfulness exercises, sometimes distraction can be great for a while. Sometimes sitting with the difficulty and realizing, hey, even though this was a really awful night, it was really hard, but you know what? All right, I made it through. Deciding, is this game worth it to me? For some people, it's like, wow, that was really hard and not worth it. The payout for poly just does not feel good to me. You don't have to keep trying. Poly feels like, sometimes people are like, I love poly. Poly's amazing. I'm dating 17 people. It's fantastic. When that partner dates, I freak the hell out. Don't shame yourself. Don't make yourself feel bad. You're not a hypocrite. You're not a bad person. Take intellectual responsibility for your actions and sit with the feeling, and let it move through you and let it soften over the process. give yourself time and love and patience. It will get easier. It is okay that it's hard right now. It doesn't mean that you're bad at poly or that, everything's going to explode. It just means you're doing something really hard.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And thank you so much. This has been an absolute joy. And before we cut off, if people are wanting to be able to utilize your wonderful services, how can they get in contact with you, Magenta?
Thank you for asking. So my website is polycoach.org.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. I'm also on YouTube. I don't have much up, but there will be more. There is more coming out, which is at Polyamory Coaching. And actually, I think the website's probably the easiest. You can always email me through there. You can also sign up for a free 30-minute intro session.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to call, sometimes actually 30 minutes is all you need. But that can be a really nice way to have a conversation, see if I have tools that are useful to you, kind of talk about whatever's on your mind. And you can sign up for that on my website. You can also have access to all my videos and stuff like that at polycoach.org.
Thank you. And there'll be, if you're watching this on YouTube, it'll be on the screen. If you listen to this on the podcast, I'll link it in the description for you as well.
Well, I am going to Patreon support the heck out of you. You are awesome. And I am now a total fan. So.
Oh, well, Magenta, thank you so much. I'm going to plug this as everywhere as I can.
Thank you so much for having me. This is so much fun. This is a great evening.
This really was. And I thank you once again for sharing yourself and sharing what your experience and what it is you do. It really was a blessing and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Me too. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And you have a wonderful night because I think you're 2 hours in the past. So
yes. Oh my goodness. So it is really late for you.
Oh, pish posh. I'm a night owl. I'm perfectly fine. Well, thank you so much, my love.
My pleasure.
Bye, darling.
Bye-bye.
Oh, good. Well, everyone, that was a fantastic interview. I know we went longer, but honestly, it was a fantastic topic that I thoroughly enjoyed us enjoying together. I hope you found it wonderful. I hope you opened your eyes to some new lives and some new things. And if you really did want to suggest any more topics, feel free to put them in the comments section below. And if you want to support me, again, patreon.com/ShiningNathan. And be sure to comment those suggestions in the comments section so I can expand more. Our next episode is going to be talking with somebody who runs a circus sideshow. I know, I'm really excited. So as always, remember, I love you, and if you're going through a tough time, grant yourself grace during this time. You take care of yourself and drink your water.
Thank you everyone for watching this episode. I am truly grateful that all of y'all are here. Wherever you listen to watch this from, thank you so much. I also want to give a special thank you that I forgot to give in the recording to my patrons on Patreon and every single one that asked these beautiful questions. Without them, I could not make this content possible or feed myself and my kitty cat. So thank you as always from the bottom of my heart. Until our next episode, you take care of yourself, give yourself some grace, and I love you.